Welcome to Novel Love Hearing. Get ready for heart-pounding action, thrilling adventures with fresh and unique elements, a touch of romance, and a dash of harem. Everything you're craving is right here. We're excited to have you join us on this journey. So come along to Novel Love Hearing, we're waiting for you. As a small favor, please consider sharing Novel Love Hearing with your friends, family, in YouTube comments, on Discord, Reddit, or anywhere else you hang out online. Happy listening, and enjoy the ride. It wasn't just raw talent. Ren had honed his skills with methodical and rigorous training. After a few seconds of silence, Yagura finally spoke. Why do you want to become stronger? The question caught Ren off guard. He remained still for a moment, his mind racing to find the right answer. Then, with his characteristic defiance, he lifted his gaze and replied with unwavering confidence, to protect our village. For a moment, Yagura said nothing, merely scrutinizing him, as if searching for any trace of falsehood. A student this determined. Hidden Mist Village hasn't had someone like this in a long time. Then, with a subtle nod of approval, he spoke again. Good. Yagura took a few steps back and crossed his arms. Now show me what you've learned about the water style, Mirror Veil Jutsu. Ren straightened up, regaining his composure. He closed his eyes briefly, recalling everything he had analyzed and deciphered from the hints the Mizukage had left him. With fluid movements, he formed the necessary hand seals. The water around him began to swirl, thickening into a transparent veil that rose like a shimmering liquid mirror. His reflection appeared on the surface, yet it wasn't just a reflection. It moved with a slight delay, almost as if it had a will of its own. A subtle illusion. A visual echo of the ninja who created it. Yagura observed carefully, noting Ren's precision in execution. Impressive. Even with only a few clues, he managed to decipher most of the technique. The watery barrier wavered for a few seconds before dissolving into mist, and Ren exhaled lightly, reassessing his balance. Yagura crossed his arms again, studying the boy. Precision, quick analysis, technique, determination. He looks like a seasoned ninja in a child's body. The Mizukage lowered his gaze slightly. The death of his father must have had a massive impact on him. There was something unusual about Ren. An emotional control too mature for his age. After a brief pause, Yagura finally spoke. You're different from the other students, Mizutani. Ren merely smirked slightly. I'll take that as a compliment, Mizukage-sama. Yagura observed Ren for a final moment before reaching into his cloak and pulling out a sealed scroll bearing the symbol of Hidden Mist Village. With a calm motion, he handed it to the young student. Ren accepted it with a slight sense of uncertainty. A scroll? This will be useful to you, Yagura explained. It's the next step in mastering the small mirror jutsu. Ren looked down at the parchment in his hands, the seal glowing faintly in the dimming light of the setting sun. Yagura fixed his gaze on him once more, then let a small, almost imperceptible smile cross his lips. Keep improving. Hidden Mist Village needs ninjas like you. Ren nodded, feeling the weight of those words. Without Obito's interference, I think Yagura wouldn't have been such a bad Mizukage after all, Ren thought. Yagura turned, walking away with his usual confident stride. This wasn't just a test. It was a recognition. And yet, as Ren watched the Mizukage's figure disappear into the mist, a thought crept into his mind. Why do I feel like this was just the beginning? Chapter 126, Turning Points. 2 months had passed since Yagura's test. Ren's training had continued relentlessly. His daily routine remained ruthless, running at dawn, strength exercises, swimming, taijutsu training, and elemental chakra control. The added weight he now wore amounted to 35 kilograms, and his body was responding, adapting to the constant pressure. What had once been an unbearable challenge now felt almost natural. But it wasn't just his physical endurance that had improved. Thanks to the strategic use of 2 shadow clones at a time, his mastery of ninjutsu was growing at an impressive rate. With the clones sharing the workload, his ability to analyze, experiment, and correct mistakes had increased exponentially. Yet, it still wasn't enough. In his laboratory, hidden in the basement of his mother's shop, Ren worked with meticulous attention. The dim lantern light flickered over workbenches covered with scrolls, notes, and glass vials containing unknown solutions. Before him, a small white rat twitched slightly as he steadily injected it with a solution of the serum obtained from Glycine Nebula. An experimental formula. An attempt to enhance the mitochondria's role to increase both vitality and chakra reserves. Ren narrowed his eyes, watching closely for any reaction. If this solution finally works, it would be a major breakthrough for my research. The potential was enormous. A serum capable of increasing chakra production could make the difference between victory and defeat in battle. If perfected, it would become a secret weapon to carry with him, an emergency reserve for desperate situations. But before getting too excited, he needed concrete results. After carefully placing the rat back in its cage, His mind returned to analyzing his own progress. The water style, water spikes, is mastered, he thought. But it's nowhere near Ganri-sama's level. I still need a water source, while he can generate it directly from the moisture in the air. And then there's my execution speed. He took a deep breath. Too slow. That was the most severe flaw. Speed decides battles. Even the most powerful technique is useless if it can't be executed in time. He needed more practice. More refinement. More control. In the opposite corner of the room, his two shadow clones were deeply engrossed in studying an ancient scroll. The small mirror jutsu, an advanced and complex jutsu, still not fully understood. The interaction between reflections and water surfaces, the way chakra altered perceptions, every detail of the technique seemed elusive, almost intangible. But with two clones dedicated to deciphering every passage, the analysis was progressing at an accelerated pace. In the silence of the room, the only sound was the slow dripping of water from one of the test tubes onto the cold stone of the workbench. The air was thick with the scent of herbs, minerals, and fresh ink. If I can master this technique, it could become my greatest tool. He gripped the pen between his fingers, adding new annotations to his research journal. Improve defense. Strengthen illusions. Execute an offensive application. A faint tick-tick-tick echoed in the lab, the sound of the rat's claws scratching against the metal bottom of its cage. Ren lifted his gaze from his notes, watching the creature intently. The effects of the Glycina Nebula serum were manifesting rapidly. The rat, which had previously moved with its usual sluggishness, now seemed hyperactive. It frantically ran along the edges of the cage, its tiny paws almost skimming the metal walls with unusual agility. Ren narrowed his eyes, analyzing every movement. When taken orally, it showed no visible symptoms, but with the injection, he murmured, quickly noting the changes. The rat's pupils were dilated, its muscles tense. Every fiber of its body seemed to be in a state of hyperstimulation. Its paws moved faster than normal, as if the creature was unable to manage the sudden surge of energy coursing through it. Then, in an almost eerie gesture, the rat began hurling itself against the cage walls. A strike. Then another. Then another. Bang. 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 It leaped frantically, pushing off with abnormal strength, desperately seeking an escape. Each impact made the small metal enclosure vibrate, as if it were possessed by an uncontrollable impulse to flee. Ren stepped closer, observing carefully. It seems to have an energy surplus it can't dissipate. The realization hit him instantly. The serum was increasing mitochondrial activity, providing an extra energy reserve, but without a mechanism to regulate it. The rat's body was working too fast, without having time to adapt to the sudden increase in vitality. The rat continued to run, its small ribcage rising and falling rapidly. Too rapidly. Then, suddenly, it stopped. Its breathing became irregular, its chest rising and falling with uncontrollable spasms. Its paws trembled violently, unable to support the weight of its own body. And finally, one last gasp. Then nothing. Ren remained still, the sudden silence filling the room, louder than the chaos just moments before. Damn it. The dosage was too high. He ran a hand over his forehead, feeling a slight frustration build inside him. He had failed. But fortunately, he had tested it on a rat first. Slowly approaching the cage, he observed it with cold, analytical eyes. He needed to understand exactly what had gone wrong. The stimulation had been excessive. The rat's heart couldn't withstand the increase in metabolic activity. It wasn't just a matter of excess energy, it was the lack of a discharge mechanism. The body had received too much chakra and vitality at once, with no way to release it. An idea crossed his mind. Maybe a calming component could stabilize the energy release. But which one? He turned toward his shelves, his brain already processing possible solutions. Maybe an extract of sansashi root? Or a regulatory agent, something that would release more gradually? Failure didn't discourage him. On the contrary, it pushed him to find a better solution. He clenched his fist, closing his eyes for a moment. He wouldn't let a simple mistake stop him. Chapter 126, Exams? Another month had passed. The atmosphere at the Hidden Mist Village Academy had grown heavier, more tense. Even the most carefree students seemed to feel the pressure lingering within the school walls. That day, Fujimoto-sensei stood before the class, crossing his arms. His expression was stern, his tone devoid of any trace of lightness. In less than a month, the exams to become genin will take place. A wave of tension swept through the classroom. The whispers ceased, every face turned toward their teacher. Many of you have been here for 3 years and know well what it means to become a ninja. But allow me to remind you once again. Fujimoto let his gaze drift across the students, his eyes as cold as steel. Being a ninja is not a game. It is not a title earned through a written test and a few well-executed techniques. It means joining Hidden Mist Village's military forces. It means putting your life on the line every day. It means killing, if necessary. An unnatural silence settled over the class. Some students lowered their gazes, others visibly swallowed hard. And the exams reflect this reality, Fujimoto continued. Every year, during the third-year exam, there are always students who do not make it. It's a certainty. Someone fails. Someone dies. His words landed like stones. Ren noticed that Misaki remained impassive, arms crossed, eyes cold. Not a single reaction. But the rest of the class told a different story. Some students exchanged uneasy glances, others seemed unsure of what to think. Even those who usually acted confidently now appeared less certain. Ren felt a familiar sensation tightening in his chest. It's beginning. The Geinin exam. The first step toward the bloody mist. He had always been aware of what awaited him, but now that the moment was approaching, he couldn't help but feel tense. His thoughts were interrupted by a light tug on his sleeve. He turned and found Juneko, her face more serious than usual. Her eyes were a mix of concern and determination. "We need to train harder," she whispered. Ren remained silent for a moment, then nodded. "Let's train together this week." He turned to Aoi, who looked thoughtful. "What do you say, Kaido?" Aoi adjusted his glasses with a mechanical gesture. "Logically, training together will improve our physical endurance, coordination, and chakra control." Then he added with a tired smile, "So yes, I agree." On the other side of the classroom, Yukiko listened to the conversation out of the corner of her ear. She said nothing. She didn't turn. But Ren could feel that she was paying attention. Meanwhile, Shinji Karatachi seemed completely indifferent to the tension in the air. Leaning against his desk with a semi-bored expression, he looked almost apathetic. Ren glanced at him briefly. Maybe his Hazuki blood allows him to stay so calm? Or perhaps he simply didn't grasp the gravity of the situation. A little further away, Shinigami sat with his back rigid, hands clenched on his knees. Ren noticed that he seemed to want to say something. He hesitated. As if he wanted to propose training together, but something held him back. Ren knew exactly what it was. The Kaguya clan was proud, strict, and viewed training with outsiders as a sign of weakness. But Ren did not ignore him. He turned toward him, openly inviting, "Shin, do you want to train with us?" A brief moment of silence. Shin's eyes moved quickly, scanning Ren and the rest of the group. The boy slightly opened his mouth but then stopped. His gaze became even more rigid. "I don't need to." His voice was controlled, almost cold. Ren immediately recognized the forced pride in his words. Shin wanted to join them. But his bloodline and the weight of his clan's expectations prevented him from accepting. Ren did not insist. He simply gave a slight nod. But deep down, he knew that the restrained expression on Shin's face spoke volumes more than his words. The academy was silent. The announcement of the exam had left its mark on everyone. As the day went on, Ren observed his classmates more carefully. Some pretended nothing was wrong, trying to appear confident. Others were visibly shaken, as if they were realizing for the first time just how real the risk was. But one thing was certain. The Geinin exam would not be a simple test of skill. It was a ruthless, unforgiving selection. And not everyone would make it out alive. That afternoon, Ren met Utakata in one of the most secluded areas of the eastern training grounds. It was a tranquil place, surrounded by towering trees reflecting in the still waters of the scattered ponds. The air was crisp, and the rustling leaves in the wind created an illusion of peace. But the stillness was shattered by the sharp sound of a clash. Clang. Ren's strike was deflected by Utakata's flute, which he wielded as a barrier with an almost natural grace. Ren landed lightly, immediately resuming his combat stance. Utakata moved fluidly, letting the flute slide between his fingers before assuming a relaxed posture. "All right, I think we can stop here." Ren wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, trying to steady his breath. It had been another intense sparring session. Utakata approached with his usual calm expression, but this time there was something different in his eyes. "You're getting stronger, Ren." Utakata's voice was sincere, devoid of flattery. Those words struck Ren more than he cared to admit. Hearing praise from Utakata, someone he considered vastly superior, carried a different weight. For a moment, Ren even felt embarrassed, but he masked it with humility. "Thanks. But I think I can do better." Utakata tilted his head slightly, a faint smile on his lips. "Ren, at the beginning, I didn't even need to try during our sparring matches." He turned slightly, gazing at the sky before fixing his eyes on Ren again with newfound focus. "But in the past few months, I've had to raise my level of effort." Ren's eyes widened slightly. It wasn't an anti-compliment. It was the truth. Utakata, the ninja he had always considered out of reach, was truly saying he had to put in effort to fight him? A strange sense of satisfaction mixed with a new awareness. Then I'm not that far off. But before he could respond, Yukata's expression darkened slightly. His usual smile vanished, replaced by something more serious. I know you're worried about the exams. Ren didn't answer immediately. But his expression betrayed him. Yukata lowered his gaze slightly, as if reflecting on something painful. Then, with a heavier voice, he added, unfortunately, our village has this senseless tradition. The wind blew gently, carrying the distant sound of water flowing through a nearby stream. The weight of those words settled in the air. Ren wasn't the only one who thought that way. The Bloody Mist system was a cruel tradition, a ruthless selection that forced students to fight each other like animals to prove who was worthy of becoming a ninja. Many died. And in Hidden Mist Village, it was considered normal. Yukata remained silent for a moment, as if struggling with his own frustration. But then, something in his eyes changed. His expression became firmer, more resolute. But that's exactly why we must become stronger. Ren looked up at him. One day. We must change this tradition too. Yukata's tone was not filled with anger or despair. It was a simple declaration of intent. An unshakable certainty. Ren stood still, absorbing those words. It wasn't just about surviving. It wasn't just about becoming stronger. It was about changing the system. So that no more children would be sent to the slaughter in the name of a tradition that was now worn and bloodstained. Ren lowered his gaze, clenching his fists for a moment. Then, with a subtle smile, he nodded. Yes. We will become stronger. Yukata watched him before letting out a small sigh and smiling again. Good. Now go home and rest. Tomorrow we will train again. Ren turned, starting to walk away. But as he walked, he felt a new spark ignite within him. It wasn't just an exam. It wasn't just an obstacle to overcome. It was the first step towards something greater. And he had no intention of stopping. Chapter 127, The Rhythm of Growth. The morning air was thick with humidity, and the crashing waves along Hidden Mist Village's coastline blended with the labored breathing of three young shinobi. Ren, Aoi, and Juneko. It was the 5th consecutive day of intense training, and Ren had decided to raise the bar even higher. He had modified their routine, pushing Aoi and Juneko beyond their limits. A shinobi's body only adapted under constant stress, and if they wanted to survive the Genin exam, they couldn't afford mediocre training. That morning, before dawn, Ren had made a proposition. From now on, we increase the weights. Aoi had stared at him in silence, adjusting his glasses with his usual methodical gesture, analyzing the proposal with his rational mind. By how much? He finally asked. 5 kilos for you. 3 for Juneko. Juneko had let out an exaggerated groan. Ren, you're not normal. This training is easy for you because you're obsessed with self-improvement. Ren had simply crossed his arms, his expression neutral. If you want, you can wear my weights. Aoi thought for a moment, then nodded. Alright. That makes sense. Juneko's eyes widened in disbelief. You guys are insane. I weigh half as much as Ren, you know that? The heavier your body now, the faster you'll be when you take them off. She let out a dramatic sigh but eventually accepted the challenge. And so, now, with increased weights and exhausted bodies, they ran along the coast, not stopping, not speaking. The sound of their footsteps sank into the damp sand. Thump. 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 5 kilometers of morning endurance training, with extra weight. Ren now carried 40 kilograms of weights. The salty wind cut against their faces, each breath a battle, every step a small inferno burning their muscles. After the run, they moved straight into strength exercises, one-handed push-ups, with chakra focused for balance. Explosive squats, strengthening their legs and improving their jumping power. Planks with extra weight on their backs, increasing core endurance. Aoi was adjusting to the routine, though the sweat trickling down his temple betrayed the effort he was putting in. Juneko, however, looked on the verge of a mental breakdown. I hate you guys. She panted, completing her final squat. Ren knelt beside her, expression unreadable. 10 more. Juneko shot him a glare that screamed drop dead, but she obeyed, gritting her teeth. Her body trembled from exhaustion, but she didn't stop. When she finally finished the last repetition, she collapsed onto her back, staring at the sky, gasping for air. If I survive this, I'll be the strongest ninja in the village. Ren stood up and tossed a kunai near her foot. You're still alive. The next drill is jump and controlled landing with chakra. Juneko let out a strangled noise of frustration but forced herself back onto her feet. I swear, after the exam, I'm going to disappear for a week and sleep. If we survive the exam, you can sleep as much as you want. Juneko froze. She had never truly stopped to consider that if. She felt it. She understood it. And her expression shifted. She didn't complain anymore. After the physical training, they finally took a break, sitting on the damp grass. But rest was only a shift in focus. Ren and Aoi began concentrating chakra into their hands, working on the precision of medical ninjutsu. Juneko watched them, puzzled. I don't see why I need to learn this. Without taking his eyes off the small self-inflicted wound on his palm, Ren replied calmly. It can mean the difference between life and death. Aoi, ever analytical, added, healing is one thing, but fine chakra control helps in many other techniques. Juneko still looked skeptical, but after watching Ren's skin heal within seconds, she leaned forward. At least teach me the basics. And so, while Aoi and Ren explained chakra control for medical techniques, Juneko attempted to replicate it, though with little success. Now it's my turn. Follow me. Juneko stood up, eyes brimming with determination, and sprinted into the forest. Let's see how well you handle my Ganjutsu. Without waiting for a response, she quickly formed 3 seals. Sly Mind Effect Jutsu. Ren and Aoi continued following her, but after a few minutes, something felt off. They were moving in circles, trapped in an endless loop. Ren instantly recognized the technique. Well done, Juneko. A Ganjutsu. Good. I'll let Aoi figure it out himself so I can evaluate his progress. Aoi met his gaze, realizing they had fallen into an illusion. After receiving a small approving nod from Ren, he released a burst of chakra to break the effect. Kai. Juneko observed them with a smirk. Better than last time. They're both improving. Compared to last year, they've come a long way. I just hope it's enough. As they returned to the beach, Juneko suddenly turned to Ren. Ren, show us your mirror jutsu. Ren stiffened slightly. Not only is it incomplete, but it's better not to reveal too much. Someone might be watching. It's not complete yet. That doesn't matter. Just show us what you can do. Just enough to keep them motivated. He knelt by a small pond, pressing his fingers against the surface. A pulse of chakra flowed through the water. At first, nothing happened. Then, the surface rippled, and Ren's reflection distorted, shifting with a slight delay, almost as if it were separated from reality itself. Juneko and Aoi watched, mesmerized. You still can't replicate enemy jutsu, can you? Aoi asked. Ren shook his head. No. I can only alter perception. But deep down, he knew that wasn't entirely true. I'm actually a little further along than this. But for now, it's best to keep it to myself. They trained until the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the sand. Something had changed between them. The Genin exam was approaching. And with it, their first true battle for survival. Chapter 128, the final preparation. Only 2 days remained until the third-year exam. Ren sat on a flat rock in a desolate wasteland, gazing at the horizon, lost in thought. The past days replayed in his mind, a whirlwind of training, effort, and improvement. In less than 1 month, he had pushed his body to the limit. He had increased his weight to 50 kilograms, surpassing every boundary he once thought possible. The muscle pain, the struggle to move with agility, these had all become part of his routine. Aoi and Juneko have improved a lot. They should manage during the exam. It's Kurara that worries me. Even though she joined training in the last 2 days, something felt off about her. There was something in her demeanor that unsettled him. She hadn't complained about the fatigue, yet she seemed distracted, distant. Now wasn't the time to dwell on it. He shifted his focus to another critical point. The solution with the Glycina Nebula is showing results. The new rat is still there, more alive than ever. A faint smile touched his lips. It was a small success, but it proved that his research had a future. He took a deep breath, letting the cold evening air fill his lungs. Once again, he ensured that he was completely alone. Then, he formed 3 hand seals. In an instant, 3 clones materialized beside him. He studied them closely. The chakra within their bodies was dense, stable. It was the first time he had created 3 clones simultaneously without feeling drained. My chakra reserves have been growing significantly lately. Is it because my body is developing too? He stood up and wrapped a black cloth around his eyes. The air around him grew heavy. Now, he was alone against 3 copies of himself, without being able to rely on his sight. The first attack came without warning. Ren sensed a faint shift in the air to his right and reacted instinctively, lowering his center of gravity. The strike whizzed past his head, slicing through the air. He moved sideways, keeping control of his breathing, relying on his hearing, his sense of smell, and his sensory skills. Good. This exercise Ganra taught me is perfect for sensing an opponent's chakra. Though it's a major handicap to rely only on residual senses. The clones gave him no time to think. The second attack came from the left, faster this time. Ren dodged just in time but failed to notice the third clone emerging from the water behind him. A direct blow to his side made him stagger. Still imperfections in my sensory abilities. I lost track of the third clone. He absorbed the hit but retaliated immediately. He knew the clone was still near the water. Swiftly, he formed hand seals, giving the enemy no time to retreat. Water style, droplet sphere. From the surrounding water, sharp spikes erupted, piercing the clone and dissolving it into a mist of water. But as he executed the seals, another clone seized the opportunity. A wave of water extended like a serpent, coiling around his torso. Water whip. The third clone lunged forward, ready to strike while he was immobilized. Ren clenched his teeth. Twisting his torso, he grabbed the water whip with both hands and released an electrical surge. The water whip trembled for an instant before dissolving. The attacking clone moved to launch the decisive blow, but Ren had already drawn his tanto, blocking the enemy's blade with a swift motion. The metallic clash echoed into the night. The clone that had used the water whip backed up slightly. Ren seized the opportunity. He launched a quick strike. But the clone vanished in a puff of smoke. Substitution. A moment later, a wave of water, unleashed by the third clone, engulfed him. Ren activated Mist Body Flicker, dissolving his form and reappearing a few meters away. But right there, a clone was already waiting for him. As he reformed, he felt the cold steel of a kunai pressed against his neck. He froze, letting the silence take over. The clone stared at him for a moment. Then, it disappeared. Ren removed the blindfold, catching his breath. Good. I still can't defeat 3 clones while blindfolded, but this training has paid off. Now I know exactly what to improve. He stretched his shoulders, releasing the tension accumulated in his muscles. Looking up at the sky, he saw that it was already deep into the night. That's enough. Better to rest in these last 2 days. He unfastened the weights from his wrists, ankles, and torso, letting them drop heavily to the ground. His body suddenly felt light, as if freed from invisible chains. In these 2 days, I need to get used to moving without weights. Turning, he started walking home. The next day, Ren headed to the academy as usual. The air around the building felt heavier than usual, as if everyone was holding their breath in anticipation of the inevitable. The classroom was immersed in silent tension. Students sat at their desks, but their nervousness was evident in their gazes. Some stared into space, others fidgeted with their fingers, while a few exchanged quick glances, seeking reassurance from their peers. Fujimoto-sensei stood in front of the blackboard, his face impassive, preparing the final lesson of the year. It's really strange to see him this serious. Ren thought as he watched his teacher. Many were determined, but worry was palpable. Only 2 people seemed completely unaffected by the tension in the room. Misaki, who looked colder than usual, her gaze icy and unreadable. And Shinji, who was half asleep, resting his head on his hand while staring blankly into space. Ren looked away from them when Juneko leaned in slightly, whispering under her breath. Even Fujimoto-sensei seems worried. Aoi, sitting beside her, immediately looked up and gestured for her to be quiet, as if even mentioning it was a bad omen. Ren noticed that Kurara hadn't spoken a word throughout the entire lesson. She sat upright, hands clenched on her desk, eyes fixed on the blackboard. As if she were in a trance. The girl, usually more detached, seemed completely absent, lost in a thought that consumed her from within. Fujimoto continued his lesson, but few could truly focus. Everyone knew that there was nothing left to learn now. It was no longer a matter of theory. The real test would take place in the field. When the bell finally rang, signaling the end of the day, Fujimoto dropped the chalk onto his desk and turned to the class. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then, in a firm and decisive voice, he announced, "Gather tomorrow morning by the coast. Your exam will begin there." A chill ran through the classroom. No one spoke as they packed their things. As Ren stood up, only one thought echoed in his mind. The time has come. Chapter 129, The beginning of the trial. The salty air of the coast was heavy with tension. Before the students lined up on the beach, the academy instructors stood in large numbers, their gazes severe and unreadable. Several masked and boo figures were positioned at strategic points on the cliff, discreetly overseeing the entire field. And then, at the center of it all, was the Mizukage, Yagura. Wrapped in his ceremonial robe, his cold, penetrating gaze scanned each student, as if evaluating which of them would survive. Beside him, Fujino, one of the village's most influential advisors, had an unsettling smile on his lips, almost amused by the entire situation. On the shore, several boats were lined up, ready to transport the students to the island offshore. Fujimoto-sensei stepped forward, immediately capturing the class's attention. Listen carefully. This is the last obstacle between you and the title of Genin. The wind whipped his cloak as his gaze moved across the students' faces. Your exam will take place on that island. He pointed to the dark silhouette rising from the sea. The dense forest, jagged rocks, and the shadow of unseen creatures moving among the trees sent a shiver down more than one student's spine. The trial will last 3 days. Your task is to survive. A murmur of unease spread through the group. Fujimoto raised a hand to silence them. This trial simulates the life of a shinobi. You will not receive food or water from the village. You will have to find them yourselves. Some students' eyes widened. There will be dangers. Fujimoto's tone grew harsher. You must be careful whom you trust. Your companions can be your allies. Or your enemies. Silence fell. Ren clenched his fists. He knew this exam was not just a simple survival challenge. Fujimoto paused before speaking the words everyone feared. There are 2 conditions to pass the trial. Some held their breath. Either you endure for 3 days. His gaze lowered slightly. Or until there is only one survivor left. A wave of cold terror swept over the beach. Some students swallowed hard, others lowered their gazes. Ren observed Fujimoto carefully. His face was darker than usual. It was clear that he himself did not approve of this tradition, but he had no choice but to enforce it. Hidden Mist Village never changes. One by one, the students began boarding the boats. The vessels headed toward the island, sailing through the dark, treacherous waves. Ren stood on his boat, the wind lashing his face as he analyzed the situation. On other boats, he saw Juneko, Aoi, Kurara, Yukiko, Shinji, and Shin. They were not traveling together. One by one, the students were dropped off at different points on the island, separated from one another. The boat touched the shore with a light creak of wood against wet sand. Juneko leaped off with an agile movement, her feet sinking slightly into the shore. The air was thick, the wind carrying the scent of damp vegetation and salt. Ren's words echoed in her mind. Keep your eyes open and trust no one. Clenching her fists, she scanned the area carefully. The jungle ahead was dense, dark, almost suffocating. No human sounds. No suspicious movements. But that meant nothing. Every step she took on the sand was light, silent. She knew that at this moment, her only weapon was caution. I have to move. Staying here too long means becoming a target. With determination in her eyes, she stepped into the forest, moving cautiously through the vegetation. Every shadow could hide danger. Every rustle could be someone watching her. But the only thought driving her forward was another. I hope I find Ran soon. When his boat stopped on the shore, Aoi sat for a moment, his eyes scanning the horizon. He was not nervous. He was calculating. He jumped off calmly, his steps sinking slightly into the damp sand. The cold wind ruffled his hair as he analyzed the situation. Moving randomly through the forest would be risky. He had 2 options. 1, go inland immediately and look for shelter. 2, stay near the coast and try to find some of his companions. He chose the second. He started walking along the beach, keeping his gaze fixed ahead but his ears sharp for any suspicious movement. The sound of the waves covered the light steps on the sand, and the sun filtering through the clouds created irregular shadows on the shore. If someone had landed nearby, he might be able to find them. If I find Juneko or Ren, my chances of survival will increase drastically. The air was heavy. The unnatural silence. But Aoi kept walking, determined to spot any sign of life. Her boat stopped gently, the current slightly pushing the hull onto the sand. Kurara stepped off unhurriedly. No hesitation. No tension. Her face remained impassive, her eyes cold and empty as she analyzed her surroundings. Then, as soon as her feet touched the ground, she felt it. A metallic scent. Faint. But distinct. Blood. Her eyes narrowed slightly, her head tilting just a fraction to the side. Not an expression of surprise. Just a cold calculation. She turned toward the jungle, inhaling slightly to better sense the direction. Then she moved. When it was Ran's turn, his boat approached a rocky shore. Without a word, he jumped off, landing smoothly on the wild beach. The air was thick with humidity, and the sounds of the nearby forest were full of invisible threats. He turned quickly, watching the boat leave without hesitation. We're all separated. This could be a problem. The high sun cast long shadows between the trees, and Ren knew he didn't have much time before the others started moving. I get it. If they want to simulate a ninja mission, they couldn't let us stay together. He remained silent for a moment. Then, without hesitation, he formed 3 hand seals. 3 clones appeared in front of him. He immediately assigned them a task. Monitor Aoi, Juneko, and Kurara. He didn't want to waste too much chakra, so he gave them just enough to keep an eye on the 3 companions without being easily detected. I wanted to avoid using chakra so early. But I have no choice. The clones quickly disappeared into the forest, moving without making a sound. Ren stood still for a moment, analyzing the environment around him. He had 3 days to survive. And the hunt had just begun. On the promontory overlooking the coast, Yagura observed the scene with cold eyes. Beside him, his advisor Fujino smiled with a devilish expression. Let's see who remains standing at the end of this trial. Chapter 130, Shadows in the forest. Time was slipping away quickly. The island offered no respite. The forest stretched out before Juneko like an endless labyrinth, the shadows of the trees stretching into the mist, turning every snapped branch into a foreboding omen. The beating of her heart was the only steady sound in the hostile silence of nature. Fine, Ren. Keep moving. Don't get caught. Her mind repeated the mantra obsessively. It was an exercise in clarity, a way to resist the paranoia that Hidden Mist Village had instilled in her since childhood. Every step was calculated, every breath measured. The damp ground muffled the sound of her movements, but the forest had sharper ears than she did. Then, a chilling shiver ran down her spine. It wasn't paranoia. Someone was following her. She didn't turn around abruptly, she knew it would be useless. Instead, she slowed her pace imperceptibly, letting her gaze flicker to the edges of her vision. A shadow. A shadow moving between the trees. The dry snap of a branch confirmed her suspicions. A predator? The mist weaved through the branches, dancing like a living entity around her. Juneko glided toward a tree with fluid movements, pressing her body against the rough bark, allowing the forest's shadows to swallow her. Her fingers swiftly formed a sequence of seals. Sly mind effect jutsu. A whisper barely touched her lips as chakra silently spread through the air. The mist seeped into the ground, invisible to the untrained eye, ready to confuse and distort the perception of anyone who came too close. The sound of hesitant footsteps. A shadow, trapped in her illusion. With her heart pounding, Juneko moved sideways, ready to strike. Her blade lifted slightly, tension crackling between her fingers. But when her eyes locked onto the face of her prey, her breath caught in her throat. A familiar face, Aoi advanced along the shore with a steady pace, the salty wind ruffling his hair. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, scanning the sea with calculated intensity. There was nothing unusual. Until he saw it. A boat. Abandoned on the shore. The water around the hull was still rippled, as if someone had left it there in a hurry. An insignificant detail to anyone else, but not to him. No visible footprints in the sand. That could only mean one thing, whoever arrived was already in the forest. Aoi lowered his stance slightly, letting his hand slide toward the kunai strapped to his thigh. Instinct and training told him the same thing, don't stay exposed. With one last glance at the boat, he stepped into the trees, leaving the sea behind. But he wasn't alone. A few meters away, hidden in the shadow of a tree trunk, a figure watched him in silence. Watchful. Patient. Aoi didn't notice, Kurara moved with the grace of a predator. The metallic scent of blood was in the air, making her skin prickle. Instinct told her to stop, to assess the danger before moving forward. But she ignored the inner warning, continuing to follow the invisible trail of death saturating the forest. Then, suddenly, a roar. A mass of dark fur exploded from the vegetation, its sheer weight making the ground tremble. Sharp teeth. Claws tearing through the earth. The bear lunged forward, its roar shattering the forest's silence like a thunderclap. Kurara moved on instinct. She sidestepped, drawing her kusa origami in one fluid motion. The chain hissed through the air, wrapping around the nearby branches. The bear swiped with a devastating paw, splinters of wood exploding from the trunk behind her. But Kurara was no prey. With a swift motion, she snapped the chain of her kusa origami, trapping the beast in its own momentum. The animal thrashed, raw strength straining to break free. Kurara prepared to strike. But then, a sudden whistling sound in the air made the hairs on her neck stand on end. A kunai. Too fast to be random. She turned sharply, her eyes searching for her new opponent. Someone had attacked her. Ren moved silently through the forest, every step a calculation, every breath a measurement of the space around him. He had already sent his clones in different directions to monitor his comrades, but now something was keeping him on edge. He closed his eyes, letting his chakra expand like an invisible wave. No familiar signatures nearby. But something was there. An unfamiliar energy, slithering through the trees. Ren turned toward the source of the disturbance. And walked toward the heart of the forest. Far from the island, two figures observed the hunting ground with unreadable expressions. Zetsu chuckled, his voice a sharp whisper in the shadows. So this is the Great Bloody Mist exam? Obito didn't answer immediately. His Sharingan glowed in the dim cave light, a red flame in the night. Soon. The village will know its darkest period. A whisper dripping with venom. Fujino will complete the mission. Zetsu grinned. The hunt had just begun. Chapter 131, Gorilla Aoi advanced cautiously through the dense vegetation of the forest. The sounds of nature blended with the rustling of his ninja shoes on the damp ground. Every step was calculated, every breath measured. He couldn't afford any mistakes. As he moved, his hand brushed against one of the seals he had placed along the perimeter of his route. Ren's words echoed in his mind, these are seals that work both as tracking and traps. Place them along the path you take. If someone follows you and activates the seal, the one you're carrying will burn, signaling that the trap has been triggered. A simple but effective system. Aoi was not a fighter like Ran or Juneko, but he knew how to use intellect and strategy to compensate for his lack of brute strength. And in a situation like this, every advantage was crucial. After a few minutes of walking, he spotted a small clearing among the trees. Sunlight filtered through the branches, illuminating a small lake nestled between the rocks. Tee water seemed clear, a precious gift in such a hostile environment. He approached slowly, scrutinizing the surface of the water carefully. He had to make sure it was drinkable, a mistake could cost him dearly. He crouched down, observing the slight ripples on the water when, swoosh! A sudden hiss tore through the air. A flash of steel darted from the water, followed by a series of projectiles speeding toward him. Aoi reacted instinctively, throwing himself to the side as the water exploded into a rain of sharp splashes. He rolled onto the grass, his heart pounding in his chest. Someone was hiding underwater. But who? Or what? Kurara clenched her jaw, her eyes locked on the shadow between the trees. Her breath was controlled, her heartbeat marked the seconds. The enemy had not revealed himself, but the blow she had received was clear. Someone had tried to kill her without hesitation. The bear was still trapped between the chains of her Kusarigama, struggling with blind fury. It wouldn't be a problem for long, but the real threat lurked in the mist. Kurara quickly analyzed the situation. Two threats. One of them is intelligent. The other is just an animal. It was clear which one needed to be eliminated first. She darted sideways, letting her figure blend into the trees. She moved like a shadow in the mist, silent, lethal. With a quick motion of her hand, she loosened the chain from her weapon, freeing the bear with a sharp snap. The beast roared, filled with rage, but its primal instinct drove it toward the last thing that had attacked it, its real enemy hidden among the trees. Kurara hid behind a trunk, waiting for the reaction of the hidden sniper. If they were smart, they would change position. If they were an amateur, they would shoot again. She held her breath. 1, 2, 3 seconds of waiting. Then, the whistle of a bullet cut through the mist. Kurara smiled. The game had just begun. Juneko's heart pounded in her chest, a frantic drumbeat echoing in her ears. Her breathing was rapid, controlled only by instinct. She knew she was being followed, she had been sure of it when her illusionary seal had revealed the hesitant step of someone among the trees. She had cast her illusion without a second thought. The sly mind effect jutsu was perfect for this kind of situation, a silent, insidious illusion that manipulated the target's perception, confusing them, leading them exactly where she wanted. But when the figure manifested among the dense branches of the forest, a chill paralyzed her. It wasn't an enemy. Juneko's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. No. It can't be. The shadow among the trees became clearer. The face that appeared in the mist was familiar. Too familiar. An instant of absolute stillness. Her hands trembled slightly, an imperceptible flaw she immediately tried to suppress. Why are you here? Her voice came out strained, almost a whisper. He wasn't supposed to be here. At least, not now. But there he was, standing before her, his face serious, his gaze piercing through her like a knife. The wind blew through the trees, making the mist dance between them, while the world seemed to stop around that encounter. Ren advanced cautiously, placing seals along his path. These weren't simple traps but a complete system of tracking and protection. If he were discovered or forced into a fight, he wanted to have a tactical advantage. Tracking seals to identify who passed after him. Trap seals to immobilize or slow down an enemy. Barrier seals in case he needed to retreat. He was applying every guerrilla strategy he had studied at the academy. He had no intention of being caught unprepared. So this is what a mission feels like, he thought, finishing the last seal. Then, a sound. Crack. Ren turned, ready to react. But it was just a deer. He narrowed his eyes. Strange. Animals usually sense danger and kept their distance. He stopped. Expanded his chakra. There. Someone was there. Well hidden, but not enough. The chakra was faint, controlled, but something didn't add up. And Boo? No, their chakra is more refined. But this presence. There's something off. He took a more pronounced step, pretending to be unaware. If someone wanted to attack him, they would take the chance. Chapter 132, Dangers in the Mist. From the lake, water bullets suddenly erupted, hissing through the air with lethal speed. Aoi reacted on instinct, hurling kunai with explosive tags toward the source of the attack while dodging at the last second. Behind him, the ground trembled as the water sphere struck with violent impact. He quickly retreated, his eyes locked onto the still surface of the lake. Then, through the haze caused by the explosions, a figure slowly emerged from the water, its body wrapped in water, sunlight dancing on damp skin. Hiroshi Hazuki. His gaze was cold, his face expressionless as he casually swept his wet hair back with one hand. I was expecting some competitors to turn on each other. But I didn't think Hiroshi would make the first move. His heartbeat quickened. Despite the initial attack, Hiroshi didn't advance. Instead, he studied Aoi for a moment, his expression bored, before letting out a slow sigh. What a shame. I only caught a small fish. He waved a hand dismissively, as if shooing away an annoying insect. Aoi stood motionless for a few seconds, uncertain of what to do. His instincts screamed at him not to lower his guard, but also not to provoke an unnecessary fight. With measured caution, he took a few steps back, never letting Hiroshi out of his sight. As soon as he judged himself to be at a safe distance, he turned and walked swiftly into the forest. But he didn't get the chance to relax. A thick mist spread suddenly among the trees, enveloping him completely. Something was wrong, Juneko sighed, the illusion unraveled into nothingness, dissipating like smoke in the wind. Before her, Ren's figure materialized. The tension in Juneko's shoulders eased slightly. Instinctively, she lowered her guard. You were close, you know, she said, stepping forward with a half-smile. A little more and I would have actually hit you. Ren looked at her with his usual composed demeanor, his lips curving slightly. Don't worry. I know the dangers of the forest well. You are cautious, just like a sudden movement. Juneko threw a kunai without hesitation. SSST. Ren reacted instinctively, shifting just in time. The kunai grazed his cheek before embedding itself with a dull thunk into the tree behind him. Silence. Ren's eyes narrowed as his pulse quickened. Juneko remained still, her cold gaze locked onto him. Ren would never say I was cautious. Are you insane? But Juneko didn't answer. Her hands moved swiftly, forming a precise sequence of hand seals. Hiding in mist jutsu. The mist rose instantly, swallowing them both in a dense, opaque shroud. The world vanished into a milky white void. No response. Only silence. Then, laughter. A low, controlled sound, devoid of fear. How did you figure it out? Beneath the veil of mist, the eyes of the false Ren gleamed with pure curiosity. Chapter 133, Hidden Presences. Kurara ran frantically, her breath ragged, pain pulsing in her injured arm. Her hand, usually steady on the chain of her kusa origama, trembled slightly. Behind her, the footsteps of her pursuer grew closer, fast, relentless. She had no time. Ahead of her, a cliff. The void beneath her feet was a death sentence for anyone who hesitated. Kurara didn't hesitate. She lunged forward, swinging the chain of her kusa origama with precise aim. The weapon wrapped around a lower ledge, giving her the only chance to control her fall. Her body's weight strained the grip to its limit. Her muscles screamed from the effort. Then, she crashed onto the ground. A sharp pain exploded in her ankle as she collapsed onto one knee. Gritting her teeth, she forced herself to ignore the cold sweat running down her temple. She lifted her gaze. A figure stood before her. Kurara's body tensed instantly. Her hand tightened around the chain, ready to fight, then she recognized the face. Ren. A sigh of relief escaped her lips. Ren. She said, her voice slightly breathless. Ren's clone observed her carefully, his analytical gaze scanning her injuries in an instant. What happened? He asked in a neutral tone, wasting no time. Kurara leaned against a tree, clutching her injured arm with her good hand. A student with a mask. He caught me off guard. The clone remained still for a moment. A student with a mask? Kurara nodded slowly. Yes. But something about him felt off. She paused, choosing her words carefully. He doesn't seem to be from our class. His fighting style. It's different. It doesn't resemble that of any student at the academy. Ren's clone narrowed his eyes, processing the information. A student with an unknown style. And a mask? A thought struck him. Could it be Zabuza? If it was really Zabuza Momoki, then it meant only one thing: someone had tampered with the exam, introducing an uncontrolled variable, and if Zabuza was here, things were about to get much more dangerous. Kurara adjusted her stance, testing her injured leg. The clone watched her for another moment, then gave a small nod. Can you walk? Kurara took a step forward, gritting her teeth. I'm not at my best, but I won't just sit here. The clone nodded. He scanned the surroundings, searching for a safe location. He couldn't delay too long, he needed to dispel himself soon so that the original could receive this information. But his eyes drifted back to Kurara. Injured, tense, but not broken. I can't leave her like this. He stepped closer. I'll take you somewhere safe. After that, you'll have to manage on your own for a while. Kurara nodded without hesitation. The clone supported her, helping her walk for a few minutes until they reached a small crevice in the rock, hidden beneath the roots of a fallen tree. This should do. Kurara dropped to the ground with a heavy breath, rubbing her ankle. Meanwhile, The clone pulled out a scroll and began tracing a seal on the ground at the cave's entrance. The pattern was complex, a fusion of multiple techniques: a tracking seal, to monitor any movement around the area; a barrier seal, preventing entry without the correct chakra flow; a concealment seal, rendering the cave invisible to the naked eye and to less experienced sensors. This should keep her safe for a while. Once the seal was completed, the clone pressed a hand onto the center of the pattern, infusing it with chakra to activate it. A faint blue light pulsed through the engraved lines before fading. Kurara watched with a mix of relief and admiration. "What was that technique?" she asked, still catching her breath. "A personal invention," the clone answered calmly. "It'll hold for a few hours. You should rest while you can." Kurara nodded. The clone studied her for a moment longer, as if making sure she was truly safe. Then, he stepped back, closed his eyes, and dispelled. The memories returned to the original. Now, Ren knew everything. Chapter 134, Yagura's Plot. Aoi's side. The mist was thick, almost solid. Aoi felt that something was wrong. Every muscle tense, breath controlled. Then, the sound. Clang. A blade came down on him. He blocked the strike by a hair's breadth, the metal vibrating on impact. He jumped back, watching his attacker. Too fast. Not a normal student. But he didn't have time to think about it. A whistle in the air. Aoi moved on instinct. A strike missed by a hair. But in that moment, water bullets pierced through the mist, aimed at his attacker. Who had launched them? A familiar figure emerged from the fog. Hiroshi Hazuki. His smile was sharp. Finally, someone worth fighting. The mysterious enemy did not flinch. Hiroshi attacked first. His arms turned into jets of water, shooting forward with force. The opponent dodged effortlessly, precise, calculated movements. Aoi observed. Analyzed. He is keeping up with Hiroshi. The realization made his blood run cold. Water clone jutsu. A clone appeared beside him, formed from the very mist that surrounded them. Damn it. Hiroshi is my best ally right now. The clash exploded in a whirlwind of blows. Hiroshi darted forward, fluid, his body liquefying and reforming in an unpredictable fight. But the attacker did not waver. He moved with deadly grace, a perfect dance between attacks. Aoi waited for the right opening. His clone moved, trying to create a distraction. Hiroshi lunged with a water punch, the enemy avoided the hit with unnatural speed. Then attacked. A flash of steel slashed through the air. Schlack. The blade struck him square inches the chest. Hiroshi tried to dissolve into water. But only partially. Aoi turned pale. Blood. Hiroshi staggered back, his breathing short. The cut was deep. It had wounded him despite his transformation. Aoi did not hesitate. 3 explosive tags flew through the air. Boom. The explosions ripped through the mist, debris everywhere. He seized the moment. He knelt beside Hiroshi. Too much blood. The wound was dangerous. A few millimeters deeper and... No. Focus. Aoi pressed a sterile bandage onto the wound. Stop gritting your teeth and let me work. Hiroshi spat on the ground. Don't give me orders, worthless medic. But he didn't move. Aoi was preparing to seal the wound with chakra when, a scream. His clone had fallen. The enemy lunged at him. The blade gleamed in the mist, aimed at his throat. Crack. A wall of ice exploded between them. The attack was stopped instantly. Aoi lifted his gaze. Through the mist, 2 eyes as cold as snow stared at him. Yukiko had arrived. Ren's side. The attack came. A shadow leaped out of the mist, the blade aimed straight at his throat. Ren moved by mere millimeters, the cut grazing his neck without touching it. The opponent landed clumsily, thrown off balance by the failed execution. Damn it. The boy raised his hands. Wait. Sorry. I thought you were an animal. Ren did not respond. His eyes narrowed slightly, analyzing the opponent. Too calm. Too sure? Who are you? Tenzo. The boy gave a slight smile. I never saw you at the academy. Because I never attended it. I learned to fight on my own. Ren remained impassive. A lie. Things are getting worse, we should team up. Together, we'd have a better chance of surviving. Ren did not respond. Every instinct told him he was suspicious. Then, memories. A wave of information crashed over him. Kurara. Wounded. An opponent with a mask. Maybe Zabuza. He had to move. Without warning, he grabbed Tenzo's arm tightly, locking him in a lethal grip as he pulled out his ninja wire. Wait, what are you doing? I don't have time for games. His hands moved quickly to immobilize him, but his instinct screamed danger. Who? He darted to the side. Shing. A blade sliced through the spot where he had been just an instant before. Ren spun around. A second attacker had appeared from the mist. Tenzo yanked free with a jerk, jumping back. TSK. Too bad. Ren studied them. A strategist and an executioner. It was an ambush. Careful, Danzō said to the other. He's not like the others. Ren barely smiled. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Mist body flicker. The mist twisted around him. He vanished. Danzō and his partner spun around, searching for him in the fog. Too late. Ren appeared behind the second attacker. Lightning, static shock strike. The electric energy concentrated in his palms, striking the opponent's nerve points. The attacker's eyes widened. His muscles locked instantly. Ren shoved him away, letting him fall heavily to the ground, paralyzed. One down. Danzō moved instantly, dashing into the mist. Ren did not follow. A thin smirk appeared on his lips. Danzō was running exactly where Ren wanted him to go. BZZZT. The trap seal activated. Boom. The sealed energy exploded, hitting Danzō head-on. Ren approached slowly, his breath steady. I told you I don't have time to waste. The second attacker lay on the ground, still paralyzed by static shock palm. His breathing was heavy, his body unable to respond. Ren approached, his face impassive. Talk. The other lifted his gaze, confused. How many of you are there? Silence. Ren crouched down, his tone lower, more dangerous. Why are you doing this? The attacker swallowed hard, struggling against the paralysis. Then, he hissed through clenched teeth, it's not my will. They are orders. Orders from who? A shadow of a bitter smile crossed the enemy's face. From the Mizukage. Ren felt a shiver run down his spine. Yagura orchestrated all this? It was a crazy thought. Or maybe not. The exam was already ruthless, but if the Mizukage himself was manipulating events, then the real goal wasn't to test the students. It was to eliminate them. Something stinks. Ren stared at the attacker, the thought hammering in his mind. What should he do with him? If he let him go, he might become a threat later. If he eliminated him, he would be acting like a true mist shinobi. He gritted his teeth. He didn't have time for moral dilemmas. A sharp blow to the neck. The attacker lost consciousness. Ren dragged both bodies into the vegetation, covering them with leaves and branches to keep them from being found immediately. Then he stood up, his gaze set in the direction where Kurara was. He had to move. He turned. He had to reach Kurara. Fast. Chapter 135, Blades in the mist. The wind lashed through the forest, scattering the mist into fleeting wisps. Ren ran. His breathing was controlled, his heart beat fast but steady. Each step crushed the damp ground beneath him, leaving behind the echo of his movements. That sinister presence I sensed wasn't those two boys. If anything, they seemed like small fry. He had left their bodies behind, hidden among the leaves. There was no time to worry about them now. Killing in cold blood is much harder than I thought. And besides, better to leave them alive as witnesses. This whole situation stinks. That was what Ren told himself. Or maybe, he was just trying to justify the fact that he hadn't killed them. The scent of blood grew stronger, and in that moment, a cry in the night. A voice, broken by pain. A plea for help. Ren clenched his teeth, pushing himself to run faster. Then, between the trees, he saw a familiar shadow. A friendly face. Yukiko, the frost of determination. The battle raged in the forest. The mist suddenly scattered, as if the icy wind had decided to claim it. Yukiko stood firm, her breath steady despite the intensity of the fight. In front of her stood the man who had attacked Hiroshi and Aoi. Now, without the cover of the mist, she could see him clearly. A white and red mask concealed his face, making it impossible to read his emotions. But his stance spoke volumes. He was an assassin. Not a simple student. Not one of their classmates. Something wasn't right. And Yukiko had no intention of staying silent. With a swift movement, her hands weaved together in precise and deadly hand signs. Ice style, ice spears. The air around her vibrated, crystallizing into deadly ice spears that shot toward the enemy. He didn't step back. With terrifying speed, he drew two short blades, slashing through the air with surgical precision. Shing. His swords shattered the ice spears before they could hit him. Yukiko gritted her teeth. The man lunged forward. Too fast. She raised an ice wall at the last moment, but her opponent climbed it like a shadow, landing behind her. Juneko, laughter in the storm. Juneko leaped backward, dodging a quick strike from the fake Ren. The battle in the mist continued, but she kept her focus. The training with Ren is paying off. This imposter isn't that great. Her opponent moved too stiffly, as if trying to imitate Ren without truly matching his agility. He kept provoking her, trying to make her slip up. Is this all you've got? I trained you better than this, Juneko. She didn't fall for the trick. She had watched Ren fight too many times not to recognize his movements. This imposter was just an imperfect copy. But then, a sharp whistle in the air. Too fast to react. An eye's spear pierced her side. The mist around them roiled violently, and the fake Ren snapped his head toward the direction of the attack. Juneko felt the icy sting seep into her skin, the warmth of her blood soaking her clothes. The pain made her grit her teeth, but her mind had already locked on to something else. He wasn't alone. There was someone else here. And they had attacked to kill. Chapter 136, Deception. Juneko was struggling to breathe. The icy lance still pulsed in the wound on her side, her clothes soaked in blood. But pain wasn't the problem. The problem was them. In front of her, the fake Ren turned slightly, glancing at the figure that had appeared beside him. Yuki Sora. His posture was relaxed, but his gaze was cold and calculating. "Let's move," Yuki said flatly. "She's waiting for us." The fake Ren hesitated, casting a look at Juneko's body. "I want to make sure she's really dead," he muttered. "There's no time," Yuki replied, but his companion was already stepping toward her. Juneko closed her eyes for a moment, studying her breathing. "Still. Calm. If they think I'm dead, I have a chance." Then, a sound. A noise among the trees. A step. Yuki and the fake Ren immediately stiffened, turning sharply. Someone was approaching. Shinji moved through the mist, his footsteps silent on the damp earth. Something felt off. He had heard a dull thud, followed by the unnatural silence that always came when something was wrong. He stopped behind a broken trunk, peering through the fog. Two figures. One was Ren. Or rather, a copy of Ren. And beside him, Yuki Sora. That's not Ren. His instincts screamed that there was something deeply wrong with them. They hadn't noticed him yet. His usual calm, drowsy demeanor was gone. This time, he was serious. He clenched his fist. If they were doing what he suspected. His blood boiled in his veins. "I won't let you get away with this, Dash." The figure in front of Ren looked on the verge of collapse. Munashitma clutched his arm, his breathing ragged. "Please." He panted. "Help me. They ambushed me." Ren remained still. The scent of blood was strong, the air thick with iron and moisture. But that wasn't what made him hesitate. It was the chakra. The chakra signature of Munashitma. Ren knew it well. They had sparred countless times at the academy, and now something was off. The chakra flowing before him was different. Without wasting time, he moved. With surgical precision, he dashed forward, gripping the other's wrist in a lethal hold, ready to immobilize him. But the fake Munashi reacted instantly. He didn't pull back. He didn't try to break free. Instead, his body twisted unnaturally, as if his bones could bend in impossible ways. Ren realized too late. Kaguya clan. A bone, sharp as a dagger, detached from the other's arm and was hurled at him with brittle speed. Ren let go and threw himself aside. The bone projectile grazed his cheek, leaving a thin, stinging cut. The enemy didn't let up. With monstrous strength, he lunged forward, his arm transforming into a spiked bone club, ready to smash him. Ren blocked the attack with a kunai, but the impact made his arm vibrate down to his elbow. He leapt back, creating distance between them. The enemy chuckled softly. "Not bad," he murmured, cracking his neck. His arm twisted, and more bone spikes began emerging from his joints. Ren tightened his grip on the kunai. This is going to be a problem. Only Shin was supposed to participate in the exam. What is another Kaguya doing here? The fight erupted with uncontrollable violence. The Kaguya attacked with a primitive ferocity, every move an explosion of raw strength, every strike an attempt to end the battle in a single blow. "You lesser human are the ruin of this village," the opponent spat, his eyes burning with hatred. Ren dodged with precision, avoiding the bone slashes by mere inches. But his mind was working fast. "I've sparred with Shin many times. The Kaguya are powerful, but their strength is also their weakness. They're straightforward. Impulsive. If I force him to waste energy, he'll fall into my trap. But I don't have time for that." The enemy lunged again. Ren waited until the last moment before sidestepping, letting the strike smash through a tree behind him. The Kaguya turned with a snarl, furious. Ren didn't give him a chance to recover. 3 explosive scrolls slipped from his sleeves. Boom. The explosion tore through the mist, hurling the enemy against a tree with a deafening crash. But Ren didn't stop there. As the other tried to regain his footing, he placed a sealing tag directly onto his chest. Sealing jutsu, barrier seal. A field of glowing seals activated around the Kaguya, locking him in a binding trap. The enemy struggled to break free, but the seals shimmered like invisible chains, holding him in place. "You son of a..." Ren dashed forward and struck him with a precise blow to the neck. The Kaguya collapsed. Ren took a deep breath, steadying his heartbeat. And that's when he saw it. He no longer cared for caution, he pushed through the branches and undergrowth until he saw it. A body lying on the ground, The real Munashitma. His face, once filled with life and ambition, was now motionless, eyes wide open, staring into nothingness. Ren approached slowly. He knelt beside him and gently closed his eyes. The skin was already cold. For the first time, Ren stared death in the face. His heart pounded, not out of fear, but because of something deeper. So this is the Bloody Mist Village. He felt hollow, as if reality had suddenly become heavier. I don't know if I'll ever get used to this. Slowly, he stood up, his face unreadable. But inside, he felt a fire burning. A fire that wouldn't go out so easily. Chapter 137, The Longest Night. Kurara sighed. The air inside the cave was cold and damp. Drops of water dripping onto the rock speed out time, a steady pulse in the darkness. Kurara had carefully bandaged her wounds, clenching her teeth at every movement. Despite her exhaustion, she hadn't allowed herself even a moment's rest. Ren's clone had left her there, ensuring a safe place behind a sealed barrier, a perfect hideout. Yet only a temporary one. She knew the seals wouldn't last forever. Ren still hasn't come. How much time do I have left before someone finds me? She ran a hand across her forehead, feeling her clammy, sweat-beaded skin. Waiting was nerve-wracking. Every noise, every groan of rock could be a threat closing in. The chakra powering the seals was fading. And when they failed, she would be utterly exposed. Kurara tightened her fists. She couldn't afford to be caught off guard. Yukiko, Aoi, and Hiroshi's side. The forest had become a battleground. The ground bore the scars of blade strikes, blood mixed with mud, and the tension in the air was dense enough to feel solid. Yukiko panted, breaths short and ragged. Her chakra still flowed, but dangerously low. One more mistake, and it would be over. Hiroshi, after receiving first aid from Aoi, was moving sluggishly, the blood streaming from the wound in his chest robbed him of the full use of his techniques. Aoi was silent. Watching. Analyzing. But he too knew they had few options left. In front of them, the masked man stood immobile. He showed no fatigue. No concern. His two short blades gleamed faintly under the moonlight. We can't win against him. Yukiko forced herself not to show any weakness. She stepped forward. The masked man tilted his head. Then he moved. An instant. A blurred shadow. His blade slit the air, heading straight for Yukiko's throat. Too fast. Yukiko tried to form a seal, but her chakra was too slow to respond. Her pupils widened in shock. This is the end. Shing. The blow never arrived. A figure slipped between her and a blade. Metal clashed against metal, echoing through the silence. But there was no frenzy. No rage. Only precise, calculated calm. A kunai blocked the sword with unearthly steadiness. The masked man stepped back. Yukiko held her breath. Aoi looked up. Hiroshi froze. Before them, in the haze of the battlefield, stood a figure. Ren's clone. He said nothing. He didn't change expression. His eyes were as cold as the mist. He lifted his arm, kunai still tightly in hand. His voice cut the silence. Move. You can't waste time on him. It was an order. For the first time, the masked man hesitated, as though measuring this newcomer's prowess. But Ren, or rather, his clone, didn't give him time to think. He struck. The fight wasn't over yet. Shinji's side. Shinji halted before the two, arms crossed, gaze sharp. What are you doing? The fake Ren tensed but tried to smile in a forced display of composure. Not much. We're just trying to orient ourselves in this cursed fog. Terrible place, huh? Yuki Sora nodded calmly. Yes. We're looking for a safe spot. Shinji didn't budge. Something was off. The way those two had shifted, as if trying to hide something. Hide it from whom? Then a sound. A broken, shuddering breath. Shinji tilted his head. Someone was behind them. Shinji. The voice was weak but unmistakable. Juneko stood up slowly, wavering, still bleeding from her side. No explanation was needed. Shinji understood everything in an instant. His gaze returned to the fake Ren. Well? He asked icily. The figure stiffened. A heartbeat later, the transformation dissolved. Mori Mizuchi replaced Ren, the false grin gone. His shoulders sagged, hands hanging at his sides, uncertain what to do with them. Yuki Sora watched him icily. We can't fight him. He's out of our league. Mizuchi winced, jaw clenching in a tick of frustration. He said nothing, didn't protest, not this time. Sora took a step back. We have to go. Mizuchi spun, chest tight with panic. He glanced around like a caged animal, feet unconsciously moving backward. Shinji saw the fear in Mizuchi's eyes. The man would never admit it, never openly say let's run, yet every muscle in his body screamed it. Shinji stepped forward. Mizuchi stopped dead, nearly stumbling. His throat bobbed in a hard swallow. Shinji pressed his hand to the ground. His chakra flared. Corals broke through the soil, snaking about like hungry vines, rapidly blocking every escape route. The Karatachi family's KK Genkai. Mizuchi didn't speak, didn't try anything. His gaze flickered towards Sora, seeking orders or a plan. But Sora had none to give. There was no plan. No escape. I won't let you leave so easily, Shinji said in a voice like ice. Sora set his jaw tight. Mizuchi swallowed hard, hand tightening nervously around his weapon. His stance showed it all. He didn't want to fight, he wanted to flee, but he couldn't anymore. Shinji wouldn't permit it. Chakra weighed on the battlefield like the dense mist shrouding it. Shinji walked forward with calm deliberation, corals spreading at his feet, braced to respond in a flash. Yuki Sora knew he was at a disadvantage yet refused to surrender. He rapidly formed a series of hand seals, triggering a frigid blast around him. Ice style, freezing mist. The ground froze instantly, forming a slick layer that threatened anyone not used to balancing on ice. Shinji didn't flinch. With a light gesture, he conjured more coral beneath his feet, anchoring himself for stability. Coral, ascending bulwark. Shards of translucent coral erupted upward, sealing off every escape route, but Sora had already dashed away. Gliding gracefully over the ice, he manipulated the slippery footing as if it were his natural arena. With a swift hand motion, he summoned razor-edged shards of chilled air. Ice style, shards of winter. They slashed at Shinji from every direction. He parried with comparable speed. Repelling coral wall. A thick coral barrier rose to meet the assault, absorbing impact. Ice clung to it, creeping, seeking to freeze and shatter the coral. In that instant, Sora lunged, brandishing a dagger of solid ice toward Shinji's throat. Shinji pivoted aside at the last second, but he didn't foresee Mizuchi's move. Terror quickened every beat of Mizuchi's heart. Sora fought valiantly, clashing with Shinji, but Mizuchi never intended to join the fight. His priority was survival. When he saw an opening, Mizuchi's body lunged on pure reflex. Drawing a kunai, he charged Shinji in a wild, desperate attack. The blade carved a shallow cut along Shinji's arm, hardly a scratch. He didn't linger to see if it was enough. He jumped back, shouting, "Sora! We have to reach her. Only she can stop him." Shinji hesitated, just for an instant. Sora noticed it immediately. A biting wind exploded between them. Another heavy, freezing mist swept across the space. Under its cover, Sora, dragging Mizuchi with him, vanished into the haze. Shinji lunged forward, but when the ice-laced fog settled, they were already gone. He stood motionless, breath measured and shoulders tense, yet with no one left to fight. Coral spines dotted with lingering ice crystals slowly melted, leaving only traces of shattered frost. He hadn't let them escape out of incapacity, he'd let them go because their words still resonated in his head. Her. Who were they trying so desperately to reach? Who was worth risking their lives? His gaze shifted to Juneko, still wounded and unsteady. He had another priority. Turning his back on the deserted battlefield wasn't weakness or hesitation. At that moment, caring for Juneko mattered more than capturing two deserters. He knew this was just the beginning. Chapter 138, Masks and Betrayals. The mist wrapped the forest like a shroud, and the silence was charged with tension. Ren's clone watched his opponent, an agile, lethal silhouette, the mask hiding his identity. Could it be Zabuza? The thought hammered in his head as his muscles tensed, ready for a fight. Well, the only way to find out is by taking off that damned mask. The masked man moved without a sound, his figure disappeared into the haze in the blink of an eye. Ren leapt back, on guard, when a sudden blow aimed at his side. He blocked with a kunai, metal screeching through the air as it pushed him back a few meters. Too much power. Too much precision. If that were Zabuza. How did he get so strong in such a short time? The man's movements were deadly and precise, not like those of a student, but of an experienced assassin. Someone must have helped him. Ren had no time to waste. Being a clone, his chakra was limited. He had to act cunningly. Without hesitation, he threw 3 explosive tags in different directions, precisely calculating the points of impact. Boom. The explosions tore through the mist, forcing the masked man to pull back. He used the moment to jump backward, creating distance between the enemy and his companions. He couldn't win, but he could at least give them a chance. Ren sighed. The wind carried the sound of the battle. Ren moved cautiously among the branches, his breathing controlled. By now, the chakra of the nearby people was clear to him, and when he located the scene, he stopped to observe. Shin Kaguya was fighting Misaki. He didn't intervene immediately. He preferred to listen. Shin was visibly exhausted, short of breath, but despite his fatigue he continued to fight with pride. Misaki, on the other hand, moved with precision, her attacks calculated and devoid of hesitation. The clang of weapons ceased. Misaki stared at him, her body relaxed, a faint smile on her lips. "You're so stubborn, Shin." Shin clenched his fists. I don't need subterfuges to win. I fight with honor. Misaki crossed her arms, shaking her head. Such an outdated concept. This exam is a slaughter. I gave you a chance. We could have ended it quickly, without wasting energy. Shin spat on the ground. I won't stoop to cowardly tricks. Misaki's smile faltered. Then she lunged. A swift and precise strike. Shin tried to dodge, but his movement was slower than usual. Misaki hit him with an open palm, sending him staggering back. Ren watched. Every piece of the puzzle was falling into place. It's not just Zabuza. Misaki is involved in all this, too? Maybe she wasn't alone. Maybe someone was guiding her. That would explain how Zabuza managed to defeat students a year older. Ren made his decision. He stepped in. Misaki turned sharply, surprised to see Ren emerging from the vegetation. Shin glared at him in frustration. Don't interfere, Ren. She insulted my honor. Ren looked at him for a moment. Shin was exhausted, his chakra on the verge of running out. Misaki, on the other hand, was still at the peak of her strength. She crossed her arms, observing him with an amused expression. Interesting. You're more perceptive than I thought. Ren didn't reply immediately, his gaze piercing. Misaki. What are you doing? She tensed. For an instant, she seemed hesitant. Then she recovered, her smile returning with a hint of coldness. I'm winning. That's not the point, Ren retorted. Are you one of those who clings to useless illusions? She scoffed. I advance, Mizutani. The weak stay behind. Ren clenched his fists. That's not what you used to say at the academy. Misaki gritted her teeth. Then, the chakra around her changed. Shallow wounds on her body began to glow an intense red. The blood oozing out crystallized in the air, fragmenting into dozens of sharp shards. Blood-style, crimson shards. The shards exploded in every direction. Ren reacted instantly. Water-style, aqua wall. A wall of water rose, deflecting the lethal fragments. Then he dashed. A split second later, he was in front of Misaki, grabbing her wrists before she could launch another attack. Their eyes met. You're not like this, Ren said softly. Misaki was breathing heavily, her gaze oscillating between anger and uncertainty. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. She lowered her gaze for a moment. Then she bit her lip. I can't. Ren tightened his grip on her wrists. Then tell me who convinced you to do this. Silence. Misaki looked him in the eye. For a moment, she seemed on the verge of breaking down. Then. The change. A bitter smile creased her lips. You're right, Ren. Slowly, her body relaxed. Maybe I've made a mistake in everything. Ren loosened his hold slightly. That was his mistake. With lightning-fast movement, Misaki dropped low and pressed on a pressure point in Ren's arm, breaking free of his grip. She slid backward, her chakra already prepared for one last move. Ren narrowed his eyes. If I were you, I'd worry more about your friends. Before he could react, a smoke bomb went off between them. Ren jumped forward, trying to grab her, but visibility was compromised. When the smoke cleared, Misaki was gone. The only sound left was the beating of his own heart. Ren stood still for a moment, breathing controlled as the bomb smoke dispersed into the air. Misaki's words still echoed in his head. She tricked me. He gritted his teeth, his gaze cold. We're in Hidden Mist Village. I have to keep that in mind. I can't let myself be easily fooled. She made her choice. He closed his eyes for an instant, channeling his frustration into clarity. By now, it was clear, Misaki was involved, and if she was, then other students must be as well. The students I met earlier. The masked man who attacked Korara. A flash of awareness crossed his mind. Korara. He spun around to Shin. Can you walk? Shin, despite his wounds, nodded determinedly. I'm fine. Ren wasted no more time. We have to go. They set off quickly toward the cave where the clone had left Korara. Their footsteps on the wet grass were the only sounds breaking the silence of the forest. As they ran, Shin spoke in a firm voice, tinged with a hint of repressed anger. Misaki wants to get ahead of everyone. Her plan is to eliminate any ninja she considers weak. She believes only those who truly deserve it should move on. Ren listened, analyzing every word. She thinks she is superior, Shin continued, eyes fixed straight ahead. Like she can decide who deserves to live and who doesn't. Ren reflected, then spoke. I met another member of your clan. Shin slowed for a moment, surprised. Another Kaguya. Strange. My clan has always avoided getting mixed up with Hidden Mist Village. I'm an exception. The clan leader wanted to mend relations with the village. But lately I've heard hatred is re-emerging. Ren stayed silent for a few seconds. His mind moved fast, fitting the pieces of a puzzle that was finally starting to take shape. It's all connected. Hidden Mist Village, the Kaguya clan, The growing tension between clans. It reminds me exactly of what happened to the Uchiha clan. Internal tension, fear, suspicion fueled by a puppeteer in the shadows. Likely Obito is stirring hatred among the clans. But why not just control Yagura directly? They kept running, the forest flashing by them like a silent shadow. Ren couldn't ignore the possibility that something bigger was happening. Then another realization hit him. Probably because he can't. At least not now. If Obito could have controlled Yagura, he would already have done so. But the fourth Mizukage wasn't an easy target. Yagura is highly skilled in Genjutsu. A direct approach would alert him immediately, not to mention the entire village. His train of thought was abruptly interrupted when they reached the cave. They stopped at once. Ren felt his breathing slow. The barrier had dissipated. And Kurara was gone. Chapter 139, Separations and New Conflicts. Ren peered into the cave carefully. The silence was heavy, but there was no sign of a fight. The ground hadn't been disturbed, there were no hints of a struggle, no drops of blood. Kurara wasn't taken. He crouched beside the remains of the barrier that had already dissolved, placing one hand on the ground. The chakra within the seals was completely depleted. He stood up slowly, his gaze impassive. She wasn't attacked, he said at last, while Shin, arms crossed, watched him. So she left on her own? Asked the Kaguya, raising an eyebrow. Ren nodded. She's not the type to wait around to be found without being able to fight back. She must have realized that staying here would have made her too easy a target, so she decided to move. Shin sighed. That complicates things. Ren wasted no time. A swift hand seal released his chakra, forming an identical copy. Ren's clone opened its eyes, staring at him, waiting for orders. You'll go with Shin, he said. We'll split up and look for her. If you find her, let me know immediately. The clone nodded. Understood. Shin snorted. I don't like this idea, but I'll do my part. Let's go. Ren watched them leave. I have to come up with something to communicate with my clones. Then he turned in the opposite direction. Time was running out. He had to find her before it was too late. The waves crashed steadily against the rocks below. The sky above Hidden Mist Village was gray, as always. In front of Yagura, kneeling, an Anbu finished delivering his report. No deaths so far, Mizukage-sama. The exam is proceeding without anomalies. Silence stretched out for a moment. Yagura drummed his fingers on the armrest of his seat, his gaze lost at sea, his face expressionless. No deaths? He repeated softly, as though savoring those words. The Anbu did not answer. Yagura slowly shifted his gaze to him. Interesting. This exam has always been ruthless, yet this time, it all seems almost too peaceful. The Anbu remained motionless behind his mask, as though waiting for permission to leave. Beside the Mizukage, Counselor Fujino stroked his chin with deliberate calm. Perhaps sure changes are starting to show. Yagura did not reply immediately. He turned his gaze back to the ocean, eyes narrowed as though trying to see something beyond the horizon. They're too rational. Something's off. A gust of wind lifted a corner of the kneeling Anbu's cloak, and Fujino turned slightly toward him. A barely perceptible gesture with two fingers. The Anbu bowed and vanished in the blink of an eye. Fujino kept the same serene smile, his hands clasped behind his back. It seems that things are going better than expected this year, he said in a calm voice. Yagura did not reply. He continued gazing at the sea. Yet he still felt something was amiss. The sound of metal against metal filled the air. Ren's clone moved in constant defense, arms and body tense as he tried to parry every attack from the masked man. He was fast. Too fast. But the main problem wasn't just his speed, it was his strategy. He had figured out the clone's weakness. He wasn't attacking directly. He was targeting the clone's teammates. Every blow was aimed at Yukiko, Aoi, or Hiroshi, forcing the clone to move frantically in order to protect them. His attention was split, and that put him at a disadvantage. A slash aimed at Aoi, blocked just in time. A blow to Hiroshi's back, stopped with a kunai. But the clone's chakra was beginning to wane. The masked man knew it. And he was waiting for the right moment to exploit it. Then it happened. The man lunged at Hiroshi with a lightning-fast thrust. Ren's clone moved to block him, but, shing. A metallic sound whistled through the air, followed by a sharp clink. A chain wound around the masked man's wrist, stopping his attack mere centimeters from its target. The man's eyes shifted sideways. Ren's clone turned slightly. Kurara. Standing a few meters away, Ku saw origami in hand, her sharp smile and determined gaze unwavering. Now it's my turn, she said, pulling the chain firmly. Time for round 2. The masked man tensed. Ren's clone allowed himself a faint smirk. Kurara was back. And she had no intention of running away. Night enveloped the forest in an unnatural silence, broken only by the rustling of leaves and Shinji's ragged breathing as he moved forward with Juneko slung over his shoulder. His usual cocky grin had vanished, replaced by a tense, focused expression. Juneko, despite the pain, struggled to keep her mind clear. Thanks to some rudimentary medical jutsu, she had managed to stabilize her condition, and Shinji's first aid had done the rest. Her side still throbbed from the wound, but at least now she could breathe without feeling a knife lodged in her lungs. "You don't have to carry me, I can walk," she muttered, trying not to sound too weak. Shinji snorted but didn't stop. "Yeah, and then you'll start bleeding again all over the place." "No thanks, I don't want to have a teammate dying on me during the exam." Juneko rolled her eyes slightly but didn't argue. Deep down, she knew Shinji was right. The air around them was charged with tension. The battle in the mist, the deception, the fight against the fake Ren. Everything felt meticulously planned. Shinji clenched his jaw. "It was planned," he finally said, breaking the silence in a lower voice than usual. "Turning into Ren, targeting you from the start. It wasn't a mistake, nor a coincidence. He knew you'd be vulnerable." Juneko didn't reply immediately. She knew Shinji was right. "Why me?" she finally murmured, hands curling into fists. Shinji shook his head. "I don't know. But one thing is clear, we're not just fighting among students. There's someone pulling the strings from behind the scenes." An ominous shadow crossed his face. Shinji Karatachi, the boy always ready with jokes and teasing, now looked genuinely worried for the first time. He paused, scanning the surroundings, then resumed walking. "We have to find the others," he said at last, a new resolve in his voice. Juneko watched him, surprised to see him so serious. The exam was changing him. And maybe it was changing them all. Chapter 140, Hidden Strategies. The metallic clash of weapons filled the air, echoing through the trees like a war drum. Kurara moved swiftly, her Kusa origami spinning relentlessly, weaving a deadly dance around her opponent. Ren's clone, no longer forced to protect his friends, could now focus entirely on the attack. And the masked man knew it. For the first time since the fight had begun, he was losing control. Kurara and Ren pressed him with precise and synchronized strikes. The Kusa origami's chain coiled around the enemy's sword, forcing him to use more energy to free himself. Meanwhile, Ren's clone strategically placed explosive tags, restricting his movements and pushing him into a defensive stance. The strategy was working. Boom. Another explosion, another strike. The masked man staggered back, his breath heavy. Kurara tightened her grip on the chain. Almost there. Then, suddenly, it happened. A wave of dispersed chakra spread through the air. Kurara felt an abrupt emptiness to her left. Ren's clone vanished in a swirl of smoke. No. What should have been the final strike was now exposed. The masked man reacted instantly. With a swift, lethal motion, he spun his body and freed his blade, slicing clean through one of the Kusa origami's chains. Kurara lost her balance for a split second. It was enough. A well-placed kick struck her in the stomach, sending her flying backward until she slammed against a tree. Pain exploded in her chest. She coughed, struggling to catch her breath, but the weight of the battle was taking its toll. She was alone. And her opponent, though exhausted, was still too strong. Deep within the forest, Ren abruptly stopped. A surge of information exploded in his mind. He saw the battle. He saw Kurara and the clone turning the tide. He saw the exact moment the clone vanished. No time to think. Damn it, I have to move now. No more hesitation. He sprinted toward the battle, breath steady, heart pounding. Kurara struggled to her feet, breathing raggedly, her arm trembling slightly. The kick had rattled her more than she wanted to admit. In front of her, the masked man moved slowly, but his presence still exuded danger. He was tired, too. He was losing his edge. But he was still stronger. Kurara gritted her teeth. She couldn't afford to stop now. She tightened her grip on the Kusa origami, the severed chain still wrapped around her hand. The masked man watched her for a long moment. Then, without a word, he moved again. Another strike. Kurara raised her scythe to deflect the blow, but this time the force of the attack made her stagger back again. Her breathing grew unsteady. She had to hold on. Just a little longer. Ren was coming. Meanwhile, Fujino watched the starry sky over Hidden Mist Village with a faint smile. He knew the Mizukage was wondering why the exam had been so peaceful. The answer was simple. He had hidden the truth from him. Not all students were fighting to win. Some, carefully selected, had received a clear message: these are the Mizukage's orders. Hidden Mist Village needs strength. Only those who are worthy must rise. They had been led to believe that eliminating the weak was Yagura's will. But the Mizukage knew nothing. And by the time he found out, it would be too late. The race was frantic, breath short, heart pounding in his ears. Shinji moved at an astonishing speed despite carrying an injured Juneko on his back. Every fiber of his being urged him forward, refusing to waste a single second. When they finally reached the battlefield, Shinji took in the scene in an instant. Kurara was exhausted, on her knees, clutching the Kusa origami like it was her only lifeline. In front of her, the masked man, fatigued yet still dangerous, advanced with relentless steps. Shinji moved without thinking. He carefully set Juneko down and dashed forward to protect Kurara. But he wasn't fast enough. Two shadows flickered through the trees. Misaki and Yuki Sora had arrived. Chapter 141, The Price of Blood. The night was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the rustling of leaves stirred by the wind and the muffled sound of Shinji's swift footsteps through the trees. His breath was heavy, his heart pounding at a frantic rhythm, while Juneko, wounded, leaned against his shoulder. Every step was a race against time. They couldn't stop. Not now. When they finally reached the battlefield, it took Shinji only an instant to grasp the situation. The scene before him was a chaos of blood and exhaustion. Hiroshi lay on the ground, his body taut with pain, Aoi kneeling beside him, his hands stained with blood as he tried to stop the bleeding. A little farther ahead, Yukiko, utterly drained, was barely able to stay on her feet. But his eyes locked onto Kurara. She was still there, still standing, still ready to fight, even though her body trembled from fatigue. The Kusa origami was clenched between her fingers, her arms weak, but in her eyes remained that spark, that flame of someone who refused to surrender. Before her, the masked man advanced slowly. His breath was labored, his body marked by the blows he had taken, yet there was still danger in his movements. He was wounded, but still lethal. Shinji gently set Juneko down against a tree, ready to intervene. But before he could move, two shadows emerged from the mist. A sound of controlled footsteps. The slender figure of Misaki stepped forward, her presence calm and analytical. Yuki Sora walked just behind her, his face impassive, his eyes taking in every detail. Yukiko slowly turned toward her cousin. She fixed him with a look filled with contempt. "I didn't think you would sink this low," she murmured, her voice laden with disappointment. Sora didn't reply immediately. His face remained unreadable, but in his gaze, there was something heavy. The masked man turned slightly toward the newcomers, his breathing ragged. Misaki studied him for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice firm, without hesitation. "That's enough for today," she said flatly. "Retreating is the wisest choice." The masked man clenched his fists. "No." Misaki stared at him. She didn't seem surprised by his response, but her gaze grew slightly colder. "You're in no condition to continue. If we stay here, we lose our advantage." There was a moment of silence. The masked man remained still. He seemed to be reflecting, weighing his options. Then, a smile spread beneath the mask. And in an instant, he moved. A flash of steel tore through the air. The strike was lightning fast, lethal, precise. The masked man used the chaos to hurl a dagger directly at Kurara. She didn't move. Too exhausted. Too slow. But even Misaki and Sora were caught off guard. Misaki's eyes widened, her body tensed for an instant, as if she hadn't expected such a move. Sora barely lowered his gaze, his hands clenching into fists, but he didn't move. Kurara only managed to lift her head weakly. Then, a glimmer of ice. With the last remnants of her strength, Yukiko raised her hands, concentrating every fragment of chakra she had left. Ice style, Arctic barrier. A wall of ice rose between Kurara and the blade. But it was too weak. Degrees the blade pierced through it. Degrees Kurara didn't have time to react. The dagger embedded itself straight into her chest. Silence. For an instant, the world froze. Then, Kurara collapsed to her knees, her breath hitched, her trembling hands desperately trying to stop the blood pouring from her body. The scarlet liquid stained the ground. Misaki held her breath. For a moment, she almost seemed regretful. Her eyes shifted to the side. And they saw Ren. Degrees Ren had arrived. His steps came to an abrupt halt, his breath controlled, but his body was tense like a blade ready to shatter. His gaze settled on the scene before him. Kurara, kneeling, mortally wounded. The blood slowly spreading beneath her, scarlet against the damp earth. The masked man, still with his arm extended from throwing the dagger. Shinji, Yukiko, and the others, their expressions frozen in shock, unable to move. Misaki, motionless, her face devoid of expression. But in her eyes, a flicker of hesitation. Sora slightly lowered his gaze, as if he didn't want to see any more. Ren stopped. Kurara weakly lifted her gaze. Her vision was blurring, the pain growing more distant, and yet she saw him. Ren. His eyes were different. Cold. Lethal. She mustered a faint, bitter smile. Degrees at least. I managed to buy you some time. Fatigue weighed down her eyelids, her body growing heavier. What a shame. I won't be able to stop by Yuki's shop anymore. Degrees, simple thoughts. Fragments of a life that, perhaps, she had always taken for granted. Then, her head tilted forward slightly, her breath uncertain, the thread of her consciousness on the verge of snapping. The air grew heavy. The temperature seemed to drop. Ren's chakra began to boil. The masked man slowly turned his head toward him. Misaki felt the shift in his chakra and clenched her teeth. Sora took a step back. Ren said nothing. But anyone who looked at him in that moment knew that something had just changed. Chapter 142, Time stopped. The air was thick with the acrid scent of blood. Heavy, oppressive, suffocating. Ren moved forward with slow, almost mechanical steps, his heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. Aoi was already kneeling beside Kurara, his trembling hands covered in blood. His face was pale, his features twisted in a mix of horror and helplessness. When he saw him, Aoi's eyes darkened with resignation. Ren. He struck her straight in the heart. 2 words. 2 simple words that pierced Ren's chest more than any blade. No. Kurara couldn't die like this. Not her. Not now. He knelt beside her, his breath unsteady. He had seen death before, but this was different. This was Kurara. His friend, the one he had always taken for granted, always there with that stubborn smile, with that unstoppable energy. Always there. Why did I always think I had time? Degrees, he had never truly asked himself how important she was to him, until now. And now? Now she was dying before his eyes. No. Not like this. His body refused to accept it, but reality was right in front of him, in that blood spreading wider and wider on the cold ground. His hand trembled as he placed it over the wound, as if mere contact could change things, bring her back, undo that moment. He felt the sticky warmth of blood between his fingers, her body growing colder. But then, a heartbeat. Slow. Weak. But it was there. Ren froze. How? The heart was struck. Yet it's still beating? A flash crossed his mind. Wait. Time seemed to stop. Then, enlightenment. His gaze snapped toward Kurara's body. Something resurfaced in his memory. Her difficulty with jutsu. The way her chakra flow never responded as it should. I always thought it was just a control issue. But what if it was something deeper? What if it wasn't just her chakra that was reversed? But her entire body? Ren felt his pulse quicken. Sichu's inversus. It was the only possible explanation. Kurara had mirrored internal organs. Her heart wasn't where it was supposed to be. That's why she's still alive. Adrenaline surged through his veins. He still had a chance. But time was running out. Ren snapped out of it. He couldn't hesitate. He immediately created a clone. Chakra condensed, and a perfect replica of himself appeared beside him. Put up a barrier. Now. The clone nodded instantly, his hands already forming rapid seals. Meanwhile, Ren turned to the others. Step back. His voice was cold, firm, absolute. Shinji looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Ren's intense gaze shut him up. Aoi hesitated but understood. He understood that Ren had seen something he hadn't. One by one, they withdrew beyond the barrier. The clone completed the sequence of seals. Luminous symbols spread along the ground, forming a protective circle. And in an instant, Ren and Kurara disappeared from sight. The concealment barrier had erased their presence. From the outside, it seemed as if there was nothing. But inside, Ren was fighting against time. Stabilizing her wouldn't be enough. He had to do more. He closed his eyes for a moment. He thought. What could he do? Then he remembered. Glycina Nebula. A prototype. An unperfected solution. But it had shown promising results. He had no other choice. He pulled out the vial with steady hands, observing the clear liquid inside. Its formulation was designed to stimulate mitochondria, temporarily increasing chakra production to accelerate cellular regeneration. But it had never been tested long-term. Ren clenched his jaw. He wouldn't use the full dose. He couldn't risk it. He took less than half. Enough to stimulate the process but without overloading Kurara's body. Time seemed to flow too fast. Ren plunged the syringe into Kurara's skin and injected the dose. Now all he could do was wait. The following moments felt like an eternity. Outside the barrier, no one spoke. Everyone had seen Ren and Kurara disappear behind the concealment seal. Every breath felt like a drumbeat in the void. Ren felt Kurara's heartbeat pulse beneath his hands. Slow. Weak. But it was there. She just had to hold on. She just had to cling to life. Ren wouldn't let her go. Not this time. Among the tangled branches of the forest, 3 figures moved at an astonishing speed, slipping through the darkness like fleeing predators. The masked man led the run, his breath heavy, his body tense with effort. Behind him, Misaki and Yuki Sora followed with perfect agility, their movements calculated to avoid wasting energy. The moon filtered through the trees, casting swirling shadows on the trunks as the three ninja pressed forward without stopping. Misaki clenched her teeth. Stupid. Stubborn. Blind. She couldn't hold back her irritation. You have to listen to us. She hissed, her tone thick with urgency. You can't act on your own. The masked man didn't respond immediately. He grunted in frustration. Blood dripped from the cut on his face, his mind feverish with adrenaline. Every fiber of his being screamed for revenge, dragging him toward a single goal. That damn boy. Ren. The thought burned him, the humiliation searing like an open wound. He didn't care about them. He didn't care about anyone else. I will find him. I will kill him. But Misaki wasn't about to let him. We need to reach Mizuchi. Her voice was cold, authoritative. He's waiting for us. The masked man kept running, but something in his step hesitated. Misaki didn't lower her gaze. And we need to find the other three. She didn't say names. There was no need. The masked man said nothing, but the air grew heavier. They weren't done yet. Meanwhile, outside Ren's barrier, the group remained in tense silence. Yukiko, Aoi, Hiroshi, Shinji, and Juneko sat in a circle, rigid and watchful. Aoi, having just finished stabilizing Hiroshi, had moved on to Juneko. Fortunately, her wound wasn't as bad as expected. Your luck is incredible, Aoi murmured as he tightened the bandages. Just a few centimeters off and you'd be in serious trouble. Juneko, despite the pain, smirked. I trust my instincts. Aoi looked up at her but said nothing. The air was too heavy for jokes. Shinji, who had been silent until now, crossed his arms and sighed. This whole thing is strange, he finally said, his voice lower than usual. Everyone turned to him. Think about it, he continued. This isn't just an exam. This isn't a battle between students. Someone is pulling the strings. A disturbing silence fell over the group. From a shadow hidden among the branches, a masked figure watched. His breath was silent, controlled. Perfect stillness. His eyes followed every movement of the group, registering every word spoken. A light breeze rustled the leaves. The Anbu wasn't satisfied. Perhaps he had expected something more. But one truth was clear, there were still too many variables out of control. The Anbu remained immobile for another moment, then, with a fluid motion, vanished into the darkness. Chapter 143, Strategies. Kurara's breath was a faint whisper in the silence of the night. Ren was still kneeling beside her, muscles tense, eyes fixed on the slow, almost imperceptible rise and fall of her chest. She was breathing. That was all that mattered at that moment. And yet, it wasn't enough to make him relax. Time was still a cruel unknown. Every breath, every heartbeat of Kurara, could be the last. The blood that had once gushed so profusely had stopped. The wound no longer bled. But that didn't mean she was safe. Not yet. The Glycina Nebula was a risk. A gamble. He had chosen to use it because he had no alternatives, because science could offer hope where medical ninjutsu alone would have failed. But it wasn't a perfect cure. Its long-term effects were unknown, and even though his experiments had shown promising results, Kurara wasn't an experiment. She was a person. She was his friend. Ren felt his jaw clench tightly. Had he made the right choice? What if Kurara's body couldn't withstand the forced chakra stimulation? What if her mitochondria, instead of responding positively, suffered a shock? If you lose her anyway, it will be your fault. His hands tensed against the damp ground. This damned feeling of helplessness. He had felt it before. And he had hated it. The others were there, just a few steps away. Waiting. Yukiko, Juneko, Aoi, Shinji, Hiroshi. He could sense them without even looking. He knew they were watching him. Waiting for an answer. But Ren had no answers. All he had were hypotheses, calculations, and uncertainties. Kurara was improving. Her pulse was still weak but steady. Her vital signs were holding. And yet, fear wouldn't let him go. He had spent so much time planning, controlling, calculating. And now, he was forced to wait. To rely on time. It was torture. How much longer do I have to wait before I know if I've saved her? Or condemned her? But beyond fear, beyond uncertainty, there was something stronger. Something much darker. Rage. An emotion that was devouring him from the inside, accumulating like a fire smothered for too long. The masked man, most likely Zabuza. Misaki. Sora. They had done this to her. They had done this to Kurara. And he had let them go. He had let them escape. There was nothing he wanted more than to hunt them down. To find them. And make them pay for what they had done. Every fiber of his being wanted him to stand upright that instant and chase them down to hell. But he couldn't. Not yet. Because Kurara came first. Because Kurara had to live. Only afterward, only when he was sure she was stable, would he unleash his fury. Only then would he seek vengeance. He exhaled slowly. He had to keep his mind clear. There was no room for chaos. Not now. With one last careful glance, he released the barrier. The seals dissolved, the chakra's glow fading into nothingness. The others moved immediately, rushing toward him and Kurara. He felt their tension, their desperate need to know. He heard their hurried breaths, their silent terror. They want an answer. But he had no answers. Not yet. Aoi knelt beside Kurara. His trembling hands rested gently on her, checking her pulse, assessing the depth of the wound. He expected the worst. He expected to have to say something terrible. But then, he stopped. His eyes widened in astonishment. It can't be. He ran a hand across Kurara's forehead, then over the wound that was already beginning to close. Her skin was no longer cold. Her pulse was still weak, but stable. Aoi lifted his gaze toward Ren, his voice filled with disbelief. Ren. You've performed a miracle. Yukiko stepped closer, observing Kurara with a mix of relief and wonder. I didn't think it was possible to recover so quickly from a wound like that. Ren remained silent. It wasn't a miracle. It was science. It was the Glycina Nebula. But he said nothing. Better not to reveal too much. Shinji, who had been watching everything without speaking, crossed his arms and scrutinized Ren carefully. Then, in a low but firm tone, he asked, what do we do now? The air around them was heavy, saturated with accumulated tension. Kurara was breathing. She was still fighting. But Ren didn't relax. He couldn't. It was still too soon to lower his guard. Even though Kurara's vital signs were improving, her condition remained unstable. The pulse was there, the wound was closing. But the Glycina Nebula was still an unknown. Only time would tell if it had been a cure. Or a death sentence. And Ren hated relying on time. I can't do anything more for her now. But I can do something for all of us. When Shinji broke the silence with his question, Ren knew the moment had come to look beyond. What do we do now? For a moment, no one spoke. But then, we make those bastards pay. Hiroshi's voice was hoarse and filled with resentment. It wasn't just anger, it was pure hatred. But moments later, a harsh cough forced him to double over, clutching his chest with a muffled groan. He was still too weak to fight. Ren looked at him without saying anything for a moment. Then he closed his eyes, letting the cold night air hit his face like a mental ice bath. A way to quell the fire burning inside him. Because if he only listened to his fury, he would have said the same words as Hiroshi. I want to hunt them down. I want to tear them apart. I want them to pay for what they did to Kurara. But he couldn't afford to. Not now. When he reopened his eyes, his gaze was colder. Right now, we're vulnerable. His voice was calm, but deep inside, frustration still burned. Acting now would be suicide. The words fell into silence, heavy as stones. And no one dared to challenge them. Aoi, who had been quiet until then, stood up and approached Ren, his brow furrowed. So we're just going to let them go? There was doubt and anger in his voice. Ren remained impassive. It's not about letting them go, he replied firmly. Shen is still out there, with one of my clones. Soon, we'll meet up, and that will increase our chances. He turned toward Shinji, locking eyes with him. But until then, we can't move in this condition. He glanced at the others, one by one. Everyone was worn out. Kurara was still unconscious. Hiroshi was on his knees, his breathing labored. Juneko was bandaged, but still fatigued. Yukiko had completely run out of chakra. Even though he himself still had a considerable amount of chakra left, it was useless if the others weren't able to fight. He had to make the rational choice. I'm going to set up a secure perimeter. His words carried firm resolve. Tonight, Shinji and I will take turns keeping watch so that everyone else can regain some strength. He turned slightly toward the dark forest. We have no idea how many more allies they have. They would not be caught off guard. Shinji remained silent for a moment. He wanted to fight. He wanted to settle the score. But he also knew that Ren was right. He didn't respond immediately, but in the end, he gave a small nod. It's the right choice. Not the one he wanted. But the one they needed. The night cloaked the forest in an ominous and oppressive stillness. The leaves rustled under the push of the wind, and a lone night bird let out a haunting cry, shattering the absolute silence. Among the trees, two figures moved in perfect synchronization, shadows among shadows. Shinigami advanced with absolute caution, every muscle tense, every fiber of his being ready to react to any danger. He had a bad feeling. It was as if an invisible thread was about to snap, as if the forest itself was hiding a truth that didn't want to be discovered. At his side, Ren's clone moved with the same agility, but with a more controlled, more analytical presence. There was no hesitation in its movements. No uncertainty. It was as if the clone wasn't just searching for Kurara, but rather observing everything around them, analyzing the situation without missing a single detail. Shin's breathing was calm and measured, but the tension was tangible. Still no trace of Kurara. It was strange. Too strange. There should have been at least some sign. A trail. Something. And yet, nothing. It was as if the forest had swallowed everything. After a long moment of silence, Shin finally broke the waiting. "What do you think about this exam?" he asked, never stopping his scan of the darkness between the trees. It wasn't just a question. It was a test. He wanted to know what Ren thought about all this. If his instinct was telling him the same thing his was. Ren's clone didn't respond immediately. It stopped for a moment, carefully choosing its words. Then, with its usual cold and analytical calm, it said, "Something doesn't add up." Its voice was flat, controlled, but loaded with meaning. Shin wasn't surprised by the response. Ren wasn't the kind of person who was easily deceived. "I have the same feeling," he admitted, his gaze never leaving the forest. Ren's clone gave a barely perceptible nod. "We need to be cautious," it added. "The rules of this exam are not what they told us they would be." Shin remained silent. This was the confirmation he had been looking for. Further north, deep within the forest, other shadows moved in the darkness. Misaki. Sora. The masked man. Their breathing was labored, their bodies still tense from the earlier battle. The air was thick with tension, and the damp ground crunched softly under their steps as they advanced toward their designated meeting point. Waiting for them, Mizuchi. Arms crossed, an expression hovering between boredom and irritation. But as Misaki and the others stopped in front of him, the first thing that caught their eye was the absence of the others. Misaki noticed it immediately. A thin shiver ran down her spine. "Where the hell are they?" Her gaze turned cold, suspicious. "Where are the others?" she asked, her tone neutral, but with an underlying tension. Mizuchi shrugged, lazily dropping onto a fallen log. "No trace," he replied nonchalantly. "They've probably been taken out." The atmosphere grew heavier. If the others had disappeared, it meant Ren's group was still standing. Misaki ran a hand through her hair, mentally assessing the situation. Aside from Shinji and Ren, the others are no problem. It was highly unlikely that Kurara had survived. One less threat. Or at least, that's what she wanted to believe. But for an instant, an image flashed in her mind. Kurara. Injured. Her ragged breathing. The blood spreading across the ground. Misaki clenched her teeth. She pushed that thought away. "I can't afford to feel remorse. If she's dead, it was necessary. It had to happen. I had to get there first. She had to prove her worth. I can't afford to waver." For a moment, silence enveloped her. Then she lowered her gaze to the people now surrounding her. Sora. Mizuchi. The masked man. All there for the same purpose. But they weren't her comrades. They were pawns. Pawns to be sacrificed if necessary. The Kurashimi clan does not accept weakness. And I cannot be weak. And yet, in a hidden corner of her mind, the echo of her life at the academy haunted her. The friendships. The bonds she had, for an instant, thought she could have. But all of that was over. Now, there was only the goal. Only victory. For the clan. For her father. And, most of all, for herself. Not far away, Ren was working in silence. His hands moved swiftly and expertly, carefully tracing the final tracking and protection seals along the perimeter. Beside him, the clone he had created earlier was finishing the last details, reinforcing the barrier to prevent any unwanted intrusions. They needed to be prepared. The exam wasn't over yet. Ren observed the completed work for a moment, feeling the flow of chakra interconnect between the seals. A secure perimeter. A temporary refuge. Better dispel it now. He closed his eyes for a moment and allowed the clone to dissolve in a vortex of dispersed chakra, recovering some of his energy. 2 more days until the end of the exam. And I've already a lot of chakra. Ren turned slightly, making an apparently casual movement, as if he were simply scanning the forest's horizon. But in reality, he was looking exactly in the right direction. There, among the dense shadows of the trees, someone was watching them. An Anbu. Did he see me? Impossible. And yet, something felt off. Ren Mizutani was definitely someone to keep an eye on. Chapter 144, Cracks. The night was deep, wrapped in a thick silence that only the wind rustling through the trees dared to break. Ren sat upright, eyes half closed, his breathing slow and controlled. He was monitoring the chakra field around him, allowing his perception to expand beyond mere sight. Every small movement, every shift in the air, reached him as a subtle vibration on his skin. Then, something. A sound, distant movements. Ren opened his eyes, His body already prepared to react. But instead of alerting the group, he focused his sensory chakra on the exact location. And in a few moments, he understood. Ren stood up, keeping his composure, and took a few steps toward the presences. From the dense vegetation, two figures emerged in the night. Shin advanced with silent, deliberate steps, hands in his pockets, his face impassive. When his eyes met Ren's, he stopped for a moment. He didn't speak right away. He simply observed him. Then, with a slight nod, he murmured, "Humphrey." It was his way of acknowledging Ren's presence without too many words. He glanced at the clone beside him, then returned his gaze to Ren. "Your clone pointed me toward the center of the forest." A brief pause. He was right. Nothing more. Direct and concise. Ren's clone nodded neutrally, no further words needed. Shin turned back to Ren, this time with a slight frown. "What happened?" His voice was devoid of emotion, but in his expression, there was an attentive expectation. He wasn't interested in unnecessary details. He just wanted the facts. Ren didn't waste time. There was no space for hesitation, not now. "A lot." His voice was low, tense, heavy. Shin paused for a moment, scrutinizing him with his usual neutral gaze. But something was off. Ren had always had a composed, confident, almost impenetrable air. And yet, at that moment, something was different. His posture was rigid, his tone colder than usual. Shin narrowed his eyes, not voicing his thoughts, but in his mind, something clicked. "This is the first time I've seen him like this." Ren crossed his arms, his gaze firm, ice cold. Kurara was seriously injured. Shin didn't move, but a spark passed through his dark eyes. Injured? Struck straight in the heart by a masked man. A heavy silence fell between them. Shin remained still, his eyes narrowing slightly. Then, clenching his fist, he exhaled slowly. "Damn it." It was a subdued curse, but in his tone, there was more weight than 1,000 words. Shin wasn't the type to vent emotions unnecessarily, but at that moment, he felt frustration rise in his throat like venom. Kurara. He had always seen her as a stubborn troublemaker, but one thing was certain, she didn't deserve this. He lifted his gaze to Ren, expecting the worst. "Is she dead?" "No." Shin raised an eyebrow, observing him more closely. "How?" Ren kept his gaze neutral, choosing his words with extreme care. Fortunately, the blade didn't go deep enough. Shin didn't reply immediately. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes darkened. "Are you serious?" Ren didn't flinch. The blade deviated slightly, it didn't fully pierce. Shin sighed softly, never taking his eyes off him. "That's a relief." Shin crouched down, crossing his arms. "And the others?" Ren quickly explained the situation, that Hiroshi was still in critical condition, Duneko and Yukiko needed more time to recover, and that the masked man was allied with Misaki's group. Shin listened to everything without interrupting. When Ren finished, he remained silent for a long moment. Then, he closed his eyes for a few seconds, as if processing everything. When he reopened them, his gaze was more serious. Dawn tinged the sky with shades of orange and purple, announcing a new day filled with uncertainties. The group woke up with sluggish movements, though they had recovered some energy. Kurara was breathing better, a sign that the treatments were working. But now they had another problem. They needed supplies. Shin stepped forward, watching Ren intently. "We need to get food." Ren nodded. "Let's form two groups. Shin, you'll go with Shinji and one of my clones. I'll stay here with the rest of the group." Without wasting more time, Shin, Shinji, and Ren's clone headed into the forest while Ren remained at the base camp. As the hunting group moved away, Ren sat down in meditation. He closed his eyes and let his breath sink with the sounds of nature. The cool night air caressed his skin, the sound of the wind through the leaves creating a constant melody, a silent heartbeat permeating the environment. But truly relaxing was impossible. His mind wouldn't stop. The best solution would be to wait out the remaining 2 days. But we'd be easy targets. And then there's a score to settle. If the masked man is really Zabusa, something has drastically changed in him over the past year. Could this be what will eventually lead him to assassinate Yagura? Maybe out of resentment? At this point, events were already changing. The butterfly effect had begun. If I were Obito, what would I do? I'd act like Danzō, working from the shadows. So someone close to Yagura is under his control. I could ask how under some plausible excuse. I'll think about it later. Misaki. She has too much determination, too much of a need to prove something. Yet something torments her. If she were just a zealot ready to do anything for her clan, she wouldn't have hesitated when Kurara was struck. I can't predict her next moves with certainty, but I know she won't turn back. In a flash, a blade sliced through the air. A sharp sound. Then, the body of a large bird fell to the ground, motionless. For a moment, the group remained still, on alert. Then, with a sigh, Shin relaxed. Just an animal. Shinji tilted his head slightly, observing the prey he had taken down. Better than nothing. Ren's clone nodded. Let's head back, The sea breeze blew gently along the coast, carrying the taste of salt and the rhythmic sound of waves crashing against the cliffs. Despite the seemingly peaceful atmosphere, the air was thick with a subtle tension, an energy suspended between those who watched and those who were being watched. Seated at the center of the vast stone platform overlooking the sea, Yagura, the fourth Mizukage, carefully examined the reports of the ongoing exam. His cold, inscrutable gaze moved over the pages with absolute calm, betraying no emotion. By his side stood Fujimoto-sensei, several Anbu, and, slightly behind, the council member Fujino. The only sounds, apart from the crashing waves, were the soft rustling of the pages as Yagura turned them with mechanical precision. The first files concerned the academic exams of previous years. He started from the first-year reports. Statistics, combat patterns, supervisors' reports, everything seemed consistent with what was expected from such young students. Deaths? Yes, but only a few. The first-year exam, though brutal for those who weren't ready, had never required an excessive blood toll. Yagura flipped to the next section. He moved on to the second-year reports. And there, he noticed something. The death toll had significantly increased compared to previous years. It wasn't just a number. It was a pattern. Even the nature of the battle seemed more violent, more lethal. His expression remained unreadable, but his mind began analyzing the phenomenon with greater attention. Such a drastic increase in just a few years. Is it just a coincidence? Yagura was not a man who believed in coincidences. Finally, he arrived at the current report. The third-year exam. He expected to find the same pattern, perhaps even an increase in deaths. But what he saw made him pause for a moment. There had been no deaths so far. The students were surviving. Was that even possible? Technically, yes. Each class had its own dynamic, and sometimes student groups were more strategic, less impulsive. And yet, something about this troubled him. This is going too smoothly. He didn't immediately lift his gaze. He continued reading. The battles had taken place, but nothing serious. No one had died. Strange. Very strange. But not impossible. As he continued reading, a small detail caught his attention. Not in the report. On the coast. The Anbu who had handed him the document made an almost imperceptible movement. A slight tilt of the head, almost an involuntary reflex. For a brief moment, his attention seemed to slip toward a precise point. Fujino. It was nothing obvious. Nothing that could immediately raise suspicion. Just a small gesture, a fraction of a second. But Yagura noticed. He closed the report and leaned back slightly, fixing his gaze on the sea for a long moment. The situation is proceeding more smoothly than expected, he said, his tone neutral, revealing no hint of suspicion. Fujino gave a small smile. Yes, Mizukage-sama. This year's students seem to be more balanced. Yagura didn't respond immediately. He let a few seconds pass before slowly turning his gaze back to him. His face was calm. His tone indifferent. Then, he called out to an Anbu with a fish-shaped mask. Go check personally. Fujino interrupted, his voice smooth but firm. Mizukage-sama, there is already an Anbu on the island. Two can cover more ground. Yagura's voice was absolute. Fujino remained silent for a moment, then bowed slightly. As you wish, Mizukage-sama. The masked Anbu disappeared instantly, vanishing into the mist. Yagura returned his gaze to the sea. His fingers tapped lightly against the stone surface. A quiet rhythm. A rhythm of calculated thought. Something was happening within the mist. And Yagura intended to find out what. Chapter 145, Vengeance. The air was thick with humidity and tension, the sound of footsteps barely perceptible on the damp ground. Shin led the group, the hunting sack slung over his shoulder, his body taut like a blade ready to strike. Behind him, Shinji sighed lightly, running a hand through his hair. We were lucky to find supplies so quickly, he said in a relaxed tone. TSK. There's nothing exciting about hunting a couple of animals. Shinji smirked, well aware of his companion's nature. You'd rather fight an opponent, wouldn't you? Shin didn't answer, but the spark in his eyes spoke for him. Behind them, Ren's clone closed the formation, silent and watchful. Then, a sound. Light. Controlled. It wasn't an animal. Shin stopped abruptly. Shinji's smile faded. The air around them shifted. Someone was there. Someone was waiting. And they knew it. Boom. An explosion shook the forest, followed by another. And another. The trees trembled, the ground vibrated under the force of the detonations. Aoi jumped to his feet, eyes wide. Yukiko clenched her fists, her breathing quickening. Juneko searched for the source, but the smoke obscured her vision. Ran remained still. analyzing. It's not Shinji and Shin. If it were them, my clone would have dispersed. Then why aren't they attacking us directly? We're out in the open. We're an easy target. Did they sense the seals? No. Impossible. A shiver of frustration and anger ran through his body. Then, without the slightest hesitation, he pronounced the verdict. Fine. His voice was a low whisper, laden with tension. Then, louder, if that's what you want. His eyes gleamed. The hunt begins now. He turned to Yukiko, his gaze as sharp as a blade. Create an ice barrier around the four of you. Yukiko didn't ask questions. Her hands moved in swift, precise seals. Ice style, frozen citadel. A ring of ice began to form around the group, solidifying into a thick, sturdy dome. Ren turned to Aoi and Juneko. Protect Kurara. Don't do anything reckless. Juneko nodded, while Aoi gritted his teeth but complied. Ren created a clone. Then, without another word, he vanished. Ren appeared among the trees like a shadow, blurred by his speed. The first attack came from the left. A sharp gust of air whistled toward him. Ren spun on himself and, with a fluid motion, unsheathed his tando. Shing. The slash destroyed the blood projectile, dissipating it into nothing. He didn't slow down. A movement. Another attack. 3 figures emerged from the mist. Misaki. Sora. The masked man. Ren dashed forward. Sora hurled an ice spear. Ren lowered his body at the last second, brushing the ground with his hand, then exploded forward. Crack. A precisely aimed punch struck Sora's chest, shattering his guard. Too fast. His body flew backward, crashing into a tree with a dull thud. The masked man attacked from behind, his blade sharp and precise. But he was too slow. Ren disappeared in a flash of mist, reappearing behind him. His hand shot forward, gripping the masked man's neck. Static shock strike. Electric energy burst from his fingers, surging through the enemy's body. The adversary convulsed violently before collapsing to the ground, unconscious. Misaki watched in horror as Ren effortlessly took down her allies. Blood dripped from her wounds, but there was no time to think. He was there. She felt him everywhere. Misaki raised her hand, the blood seeping from her cuts solidifying into razor-sharp projectiles. With a swift, precise movement, she launched them all at Ren. But, behind the water barrier, there was no one. Misaki clenched her teeth. Where are you? Then, his voice. Despair. The echo resounded through the trees. Misaki tensed. Come out. Terror was starting to take hold. The same despair you felt. The air grew heavy. When you attacked Kurara point blank. Meanwhile, the masked man, who seemed unconscious, rose. Ren paused for a moment. Something was off. Then, a sudden spasm in his chest. Memories. From his clone. Shinji. A surprise attack. Mori Mizuchi. His clone had been destroyed in seconds. Ren's face paled. I don't remember Mizuchi being this strong. His breath quickened. His instincts screamed inside him. Damn it. Better finish here quickly. Ren created a thick mist, enveloping the entire area. Misaki hurled crystalline blood blades in every direction, but it was useless. Ren struck, a clean blow to the neck. Misaki collapsed to the ground. The masked man moved skillfully through the mist. But Ren was better. Zabuza. His voice cut through the silence. The masked man stiffened for a moment. Then he attacked. And fell straight into a Fuinjutsu trap. Ren smirked. Good. Now I can go to Shinji and Shin. Chapter 146, The Enemy in the Shadows. The sound of Ren's footsteps on the damp earth was the only thing breaking the oppressive silence of the forest. He moved swiftly, his heart cold, his breathing controlled, but the tension was there, palpable. Then, he stopped. His eyes widened slightly. In front of him, Shin. His body was twisted in an unnatural position, bones visible through torn flesh, his breathing ragged, broken, almost non-existent. Ren approached with measured movements, attentive to every detail. He observed him closely. His chest barely rose. He was breathing. But with difficulty. He quickly turned towards Shinji. He was in slightly better condition. Injured. Severely. But conscious. When their eyes met, Shinji opened his mouth with effort. And with a faint voice, he spoke the truth. That is not Mori Mizuchi. Ren tensed. Too strong. To take down Shinji, who is one of the strongest, and Shin together. This is no ordinary student, he should be at least at Chunin level, or more. The pieces instantly fell into place. There was no longer any doubt. Someone was behind all of this. And it was not just a simple academy student game. Ren wasted no time. He knelt beside Shinji and Shin, quickly assessing their wounds. He had to stabilize them. He had to be quick. But, A distant sound caught his attention, at the spot where Zabuza had fallen into the Fuinjutsu trap. The silence was broken by the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps. A figure emerged from the mist. An amused smile, but tinged with annoyance. And yet I told you to be careful of his Fuinjutsu. Mori Mizuchi. Or at least, someone impersonating him. He approached the trapping seal that held Zabuza. He observed it for a moment, his expression almost irritated, then, with a precise and swift motion, dispelled the seal with an expert gesture. The barrier shattered instantly. Zabuza fell forward, panting, his body still weakened from the previous battle. But Mizuchi did not seem concerned. He took out a small black pill, rolled it between his fingers, then tossed it towards him. Zabuza caught it midair, without hesitation. Take it. Zabuza did not ask for an explanation. He swallowed the pill. And in an instant, his body reacted. His muscles tensed, his breathing stabilized, his fatigue vanished. His eyes filled with a new fury. Go. Mizuchi gave a faint smile. Take your revenge, Ren was still tending to Shinji and Shin, his hands moving fast, bandages soaking with blood, but at least they were stable. Then, he stopped. Two presences. Fast. They were approaching. Shinji, who was already beginning to recover, felt it too. They're moving. Ren slowly rose to his feet, his face impassive, but his chakra ready to erupt. He had already arrived. The masked man. Zabuza. He launched his attack without hesitation, his sword aimed straight at Ren's chest. But Ren was ready. So, someone very skilled is helping them. Someone managed to break my Fuinjutsu trap. He is a Jonin. He left Shinji and Shin behind him, raising his blade to counter the attack. The blades clashed with a deafening sound. Crash. Zabuza pressed with brutal force, but Ren held firm without giving in. Then, BZZT. A flash of lightning streaked through the forest. Ren saw the attack only at the last moment. TSK. Too late. A lightning strike hit him, the lightning tore through the forest, a blue flash illuminating the scene for a brief moment. The energy discharged violently at the spot where Ren had stood just a moment before. But Ren was no longer there. And at the point of impact, stood Zabuza. The electric current coursed through his body, making him convulse violently, smoke rising from the burns left by the attack. The masked man's body collapsed heavily to the ground, his mask cracking. And then, with a sharp crack, it shattered into pieces. Ren looked down at him, expressionless. Zabuza Momoki. I knew it. Mori Mizuchi reveals himself. A slow clap echoed through the forest. The footsteps were controlled, unhurried. From the shadows, two amused eyes emerged, a grin more akin to a sneer of pure interest. I must say, impressive. Mori Mizuchi. He stopped a few steps away from Ren, studying him intently. We should have chosen you as a candidate. Ren didn't answer immediately. His eyes narrowed slightly, analyzing the situation. He was right, everything had been orchestrated. But by whom? He had to find out. And the only way was to play their game. We should have chosen a better candidate. We got who? The question fell into silence. Mori Mizuchi smirked. Do you want to join us? Ren didn't hesitate. Why not? Mori's expression didn't change. He wasn't fooled. Ah. A wider smile. You're clever, but not clever enough. Ren remained still. He hadn't expected his bluff to be seen through so easily, but this confirmed something for him. Mori Mizuchi was a puppet. He knew more than he should, but not enough to be the mastermind. Obito had manipulated someone in power. And Mizuchi was just following orders, a movement. A heavy, ragged breath. Zabuza was getting back up. Again. Ren didn't give him time to recover. His fingers moved in a flash, two kunai. And without hesitation, he threw them. Thunk. The kunai embedded themselves in Zabuza's foot joints, preventing him from standing again. A muffled scream escaped the boy's lips, pinned to the ground, with no way to escape. Mori Mizuchi sighed theatrically. How brutal of you. Ren didn't answer. He didn't even turn around. Zabuza was finished. He had to focus on the real problem. From his position, Shinji finally managed to stand. He was tired, injured, but still capable of fighting. His voice reached Ren before any other movement. Be careful. Ren listened without turning. He mostly uses the lightning element and taijutsu. Ren nodded slowly. The air grew denser. Mori Mizuchi's smirk widened. Sparks of chakra began crackling around him. And the battle had just begun. Chapter 147, The Art of Battle. Ren remained still, observing Mori Mizuchi with sharp eyes. His mind was already at work, analyzing every detail. The vibration he emits is similar to what I felt when training with Genro. So, potentially, he's at the level of a Jonin. Although, I don't feel the same pressure as Ganru. Ren's muscles tensed imperceptibly. Shin is on the ground, out of combat. Shinji, though still standing, is too battered to help me. Ren had no support. He had to get Mori Mizuchi away. He had to lure him to the right spot. I placed seals. If I can drag him there, I can play by my rules. The plan was clear. But first, he had to survive. Mori Mizuchi moved first. A flash. A second later, he was already in front of Ren. The first strike came from above, a kick aimed at his temple. Ren lowered his body instantly, dodging by mere millimeters. He had no time to think. A punch grazed him from the side, then another. Ren deflected the second blow with his palm, countering with a straight punch to the chest. Bam. Mori stepped back half a step. He licked his lower lip. Not bad. Then he attacked again. He was fast. But Ren was no less. Weeks of training with Ganru and Utakata had honed every fiber of his body. Strike after strike, he read Mizuchi's movements, adapting to the rhythm of the fight. Punches. Kicks. Dodges. Counterattacks. The air vibrated with every impact, the ground cracked beneath their movements. Ren held his own against Mori Mizuchi. But he knew. He couldn't afford to keep this up for too long. Eventually, he would lose. He had to find an opening. And he found it. For an instant, he noticed a slight change in Mori's posture. A signal. Mori Mizuchi paused for a moment. He cracked his knuckles, then, lightning chakra erupted around his hands, his fingers tensed, the air around him began to crackle. Let's see if you can still keep up. He vanished. Ren sensed the danger. The first hit came directly to his side. Ren managed to partially deflect it, but the electric surge coursed through his body, paralyzing his muscles for an instant. Then, a punch to the chest sent him skidding back several meters. Ren gritted his teeth. Now he was really in trouble. No enemy is unbeatable. Itachi's words to Naruto when they were against Nagato Zeto Tensei echoed in his mind. Every technique has a weakness. I need to find it. He could no longer win with brute force. He had to use the environment. As he dodged Mizuchi's attacks, his hand moved discreetly. An explosive tag. Then another. And another. Every step, every movement, every point where they fought, Ren was setting his traps. To complete his strategy, he needed to buy time. He had to create space. As Mori Mizuchi charged another attack, Ren quickly pulled out a series of explosive tags and tossed them to the ground. Boom. A series of explosions shook the terrain, lifting a dense cloud of smoke and debris. Ren dashed backward, letting the confusion mask his movements. Meanwhile, his fingers worked quickly, placing more seals, preparing the field. Mori Mizuchi halted in the smoke, scanning the darkness. Then he smiled. Smart. His gaze gleamed with amusement. But not enough. Ren didn't reply. Now he had the advantage. He just had to wait for the right moment to strike. Mori Mizuchi moved cautiously. Every step, every motion, was calculated. He had figured it out. Ren was planting explosives. His eyes darted rapidly, making sure he didn't step into one of his traps. But Ren wasn't foolish. The explosives were just a distraction. The real trick was elsewhere. Hidden. A thin metal wire. Almost invisible among the forest shadows. Mori Mizuchi didn't see it. Or rather, he didn't notice it immediately. He was too focused on the explosions. And that was exactly what Ren wanted. Mori Mizuchi scoffed in irritation. Enough. Then, vanished. This time, Ren couldn't fully follow his movement. Too fast. Too sudden. Then, bzzzt. A flash of lightning chakra tore through the forest. The air crackled with electricity, the hairs on Ren's arms standing on end just an instant before the strike reached him. It was too late to dodge completely. But not too late to neutralize it. The mirror jutsu. His hands moved swiftly. Small mirror jutsu. A translucent surface appeared in front of him. Perfect. Unchanging. The lightning countered by another lightning. His attack was neutralized instantly. The energy dissipated into nothingness, as if it had never existed. For a moment, Mori Mizuchi didn't move. Then, he burst into laughter. Interesting. His gaze gleamed with newfound curiosity. I didn't think a mere student would know the Mizukage's technique. Ren remained impassive. His breath was steady, his body ready to react. Mori Mizuchi relaxed slightly. Then shook his head, as if already bored. But nothing changes. His hands moved again. How long do you think you can keep using the small mirror jutsu? Ren didn't respond. Because he was no longer there. Mori Mizuchi narrowed his eyes. Ren. Shinji. Shin. Gone. TSK. He had been deceived. Ren had acted in an instant. While neutralizing the lightning, his two clones had grabbed Shin and Shinji. The confusion had masked their movement. Now, they were already far away. Shinji tried to protest. I don't want to run. I can still fight. Ren didn't stop. This is not the time. His tone was cold, decisive. Shinji clenched his teeth but didn't argue. Ren knew what he was doing. Ren halted. He was done. The metal wires were set. The battlefield was ready. The only thing missing was Mori Mizuchi. But, he was already there. A silver flash. A blade. Aimed at Ren's heart. Crack. But then, splash. Where Ren had stood, now there was only water. And the water moved. Water style, water spikes. From the reflective surface, sharp spikes emerged, shooting toward Mori Mizuchi at deadly speed. And this time, the attack landed. Mori Mizuchi was struck. But only grazed. The Anbu froze. He was no longer smiling. No trace of amusement remained. He lifted a hand to his shoulder, where a thin wound let a trickle of blood escape. It wasn't a serious injury. But it was unacceptable. A jonin hit by a student. The illusion of superiority had been cracked. The air grew even heavier. Then, Mori Mizuchi ended the transformation. His form shifted. And before Ren no longer stood the student he had known. But the Anbu who had observed him that night. His gaze was cold. Calculating. But now, devoid of playfulness. Now we get serious. His tone was flat, devoid of any amusement. Ren tightened his grip on his Danzō. He knew things were about to change. Chapter 148, Superiority. The air was saturated with chakra, electricity, and humidity swirling together in a lethal vortex. Ren moved swiftly, using every shadow in the forest to his advantage, but the Anbu was too fast. Not just that. He wasn't using only lightning style. Water began to flow around him, the ground turning to mud, puddles expanding and shifting, transforming into weapons. Water style, flowing prison. A cage of water materialized around Ren, closing in like an inescapable trap. BZZT. The Anbu channeled lightning into the water, chakra crackling like wild serpents, electrifying the liquid prison from within. Ren felt his muscles seize, his body racked by the surging current. The pain was excruciating. Damn it. This won't do. He couldn't stay trapped. He couldn't afford to. Despite the relentless shocks running through him, his fingers still gripped the metal wires he had set up earlier. With the last shred of clarity in his mind, he pulled them. The Anbu had overlooked the danger. For the first time, his mistake became evident. The metal wires coiled around him, snapping into place like a tightened spring, binding him for just a moment. Just 1 second. But that was enough. Ren infused wind-style chakra into his Danzō. And with a clean, lethal strike, he cut. The blade tore through the water prison, sinking into the Anbu's shoulder, not deep enough to be fatal, but enough to force him back. Blood splattered onto the damp ground. The Anbu stopped. Breathed. Then, behind the mask, his eyes narrowed in pure fury. You actually hit me. His voice dripped with venom. The sarcasm was gone. Now, he wanted to kill. Shinji ran despite the pain with Ren's 2 clones. Shin leaned against him, exhausted. They finally reached the ice perimeter. But before he could say a word, Juneko raised her hand. Wait. Her eyes were wary. The condition they were in. Was this a trap? Juneko turned to Shinji, crossing her arms, scrutinizing him. Shinji, what's the one dish you said you hated the most? Shinji scoffed. That damned seaweed soup you made me try 2 months ago. Juneko studied him for a moment. Then she nodded. Yukiko, lower the barrier. Yukiko relaxed her hands, and the ice dome slowly melted away. What happened? Juneko stepped closer, concern in her gaze. Shinji wasted no time. The person Ren is fighting isn't Mori Mizuchi. Aoi immediately rushed to Shin, checking his breathing and circulation. But then, wait. Yukiko's voice grew tense. Everyone turned to her. Kurara is getting worse. Meanwhile, the fight was over. Ren lay on the ground. His breathing was ragged. His body battered by wounds and exhaustion. The Anbu had run out of patience. With a motion devoid of grace, he twirled Ren's Danzō between his fingers. You know, this is an interesting weapon. Ren tried to push himself up. BZZT. Another jolt struck his chest. Ren clenched his teeth, but he couldn't suppress the scream of pain. Every muscle burned. Every fiber of his body screamed. The Anbu stepped closer. He crouched down, as if about to whisper something. Then he spoke. Did you really think you could defeat an Anbu? Ren didn't answer. Because at that moment, he couldn't move anymore. The ground was soaked with sweat and blood, the forest echoing with the sounds of agony. Ren couldn't hold on any longer. BZZT. Another surge of electricity exploded through his body. Every fiber twisted, Every muscle was pierced by 1,000 invisible needles. His breathing was ragged, his hands convulsively gripping the damp earth. Above him, the Anbu watched with detached indifference, showing not the slightest sign of fatigue. Lightning chakra crackled between his fingers, ready to strike again. You really thought you could win, Mizutani. His voice was calm, yet relentless. Ren clenched his teeth, but nothing could stop the searing pain. Another burst of chakra. Bzzzt. His body arched violently, a strangled scream escaping his lips. The world blurred. And then, like a death sentence, after you, it'll be your friend's turn. Chapter 149, The Agony of Defeat. In the previous chapter, the ground was soaked with sweat and blood, the forest echoing with the sound of pain. Ren could no longer hold on. Bzzzt. Another surge of electricity exploded through his body. Every fiber twisted, every muscle was pierced by 1,000 invisible needles. His breathing was ragged, his hands trembled uncontrollably against the damp earth. Above him, the Anbu watched with cold indifference, showing not even a hint of fatigue. Lightning chakra crackled between his fingers, ready for another strike. You really thought you could win, Mizutani. His voice was calm, yet merciless. Ren gritted his teeth, but he couldn't stop the searing pain. Another burst of chakra. Bzzzt. His body arched violently, a strangled scream escaping his lips. The world blurred. And then, like a death sentence, after you, your friends are next, so this is how my time in this world ends. Is this really the end? After everything he had been through, everything he had built, would he leave his friends to die? Would he abandon Kurara? No. No. The pain didn't disappear. But a spark ignited his will. It can't end like this. And just at that moment, two figures emerged from the shadows of the forest. His clones. The ones who had ensured Shin and Shinji's safety. They had returned. TSK. The Anbu barely had time to react. One clone lunged from the right, the second from the left, attacking in perfect synchronization. The Anbu leaped backward, deflecting the first strike with Ren's Danto, while a burst of lightning chakra incinerated the second clone. But the time he had spent reacting was all Ren needed. Ren opened his storage scroll. 2 vials. Adrenaline and the Remain Glycine Nebula. He no longer cared about the side effects. All or nothing. In a single motion, he injected both vials into his arm. The change was immediate. Bump. Bump. His heart exploded into a violent rhythm, pumping blood into every corner of his body. Every sense sharpened instantly. The wind through the leaves roared like a beast. The Anbu's heartbeat was clearly audible. Every detail of the world around him became vivid, razor sharp. A surge of chakra coursed through his entire system. It felt like his body had been awakened by an unknown power. Did the adrenaline act as a catalyst for the Glycine Nebula, accelerating its diffusion? He had little time. He had to act now. The Anbu barely turned. He felt Ren's chakra shift abruptly. His body tensed instinctively. What is this pressure? But he had no time to react. A shadow shot forward. Ren. Without his Danzo. But with a different sword. The weighted training blade. He poured all the power of his adrenaline-fueled muscles into the swing. And without hesitation, he brought it down. The Anbu barely managed to raise his arm. But it wasn't enough. The sword slammed into his face with an earth-shattering impact. Crack. A piece of his mask shattered. His body flew backward, crashing into a tree with explosive force. For the first time, he had been hit fully. Ren didn't waste time. The Anbu was still regaining his balance after the blow to his face. This was the perfect moment to press the attack. He surged forward. Energy coursed through his body, heightened by the adrenaline and Glycine Nebula. His movements were sharper, faster, more precise. The weighted sword rose again, aimed directly at the Anbu's head. But this time, crack. With an imperceptible motion, the Anbu raised his arm, blocking the attack with his bare hand. The sword vibrated from the impact. Ren gritted his teeth as the shockwave ran through his arms. The Anbu hadn't moved an inch. Then, he counterattacked. Ren dodged the first punch by pure instinct, dropping low in a lightning-fast movement. But the second strike came from an impossible angle. The Anbu was already above him. Lightning chakra crackled in his palm, a lethal strike aimed at Ren's chest. Ren pushed himself backward, feeling the electricity graze the air. But he had no time to breathe. The Anbu wasn't letting him escape. He was too fast. Each attack was faster than the last, every strike more calculated, more lethal. Ren couldn't find an opening. But he couldn't stop. Not now. As he dodged a punch aimed at his face, Ren let himself fall backward, using the momentum to launch a sudden kick into the ground. Bam! The impact sent a cloud of dirt and debris into the air. The Anbu paused for an instant, calculating his next move. But Ren didn't give him time. From within the dust, he lunged to the side, his hand diving into his kunai holder. With a fluid, precise motion, he pulled out an explosive tag and flung it straight at the Anbu's chest. The Anbu raised an eyebrow beneath his mask. Really? In a flash, he caught the tag between his fingers, and ripped it away effortlessly. But that was only the first one. By the time the Anbu lowered his gaze to his hand, Ren was already beneath him. With blinding speed, he slapped another explosive tag directly onto the Anbu's arm. Boom. The blast sent them both flying backward, scorching Ren's shoulder. The hidden blow, the Anbu landed on one knee, his breathing slightly altered. It wasn't a serious injury. But he had been hit. For the second time. His hand instinctively moved to his burned shoulder. Ren stood still, his breath ragged. He needed a moment to recover. But he knew, the Anbu wouldn't allow it. Behind the mask, his opponent's eyes narrowed in pure fury. Again. Ren forced himself to his feet, his heart hammering in his chest. But he knew he couldn't keep this up. The Anbu had already figured it out. And for the first time since their battle had begun, he decided to end it. He raised a hand, lightning chakra crackling around his fingers. His voice held no hesitation. Only cold finality. It ends here. He surged forward. Ren gritted his teeth. He knew he couldn't dodge, dash, his hands moved on instinct. Not to dodge. But to intercept. He raised them in front of his chest, a last desperate attempt to stop the strike. But the lightning chakra didn't stop. Bzzzt. It tore through the center of Ren's hands like soaked paper. The pain was instant, overwhelming. His fingers wrenched open in an uncontrollable spasm, blood dripping down his wrists. And the strike still landed. The energy surged into his chest, piercing through the fragile barrier of his own hands. A brutal impact. The air was ripped from his lungs, a wave of pure torment crashing over him. Ren didn't even have time to think. Only the distant sound of his own heartbeat, slowing. Then, a flash. Not of lightning. But something else. A shadow shot through the mist, moving too fast to be just a bystander. Ren saw only a silhouette. One last image his mind managed to process before the world went dark. Then, his body gave in. Collapsed to the ground. The pain vanished into the darkness. Chapter 150, The Silent Verdict. The air was still charged with residual lightning, the ground scarred by destruction. Among the craters and smoke, a shadow stood. The Anbu with the fish mask surveyed the scene, his eyes hidden yet unrelenting. His voice was cold, devoid of hesitation. Explain what you're doing. The Anbu who had taken Mori Mizuchi's identity remained silent for a long moment. He didn't move. He didn't react immediately. But behind the mask, his eyes flickered, searching for a way out. Lantern lowered his stance slightly, analyzing the signs of battle. Craters. Clean slashes. Blood. And then, Ren. Lying motionless on the ground. Blood stained his uniform, his breath barely perceptible. He was still alive. But not for long. The Anbu with the fish mask turned his gaze back to the other Anbu. Why are you interfering with the exam? The fake Mizuchi remained still, his breathing calm, yet slightly deeper than normal. He was calculating. He had to choose his words carefully. Then he spoke. I found him about to kill 2 students. A moment of silence. The Anbu with the fish mask didn't respond immediately. You're saying you had to stop him? Exactly. The Mizuchi imposter raised his hands slightly in a gesture of controlled frustration. You know we were ordered to let them fight, but if someone tries to kill, his tone was measured, almost annoyed. Aren't we here to ensure the exam stays under control? The fish-masked Anbu didn't move an inch. But behind the mask, his gaze turned even colder. Then he spoke. Interesting. The fake Mizuchi didn't relax. He knew he hadn't convinced him. Lantern had seen the signs of battle. And he wasn't a fool. He had to act. Flash. Without warning, the fake Mizuchi lunged forward, a kunai aimed at the throat of the other Anbu. But the fish-masked Anbu was no rookie. Blink. A flicker of movement. Crack. A precise kick to the wrist deflected the attack. A second blow, aimed at the base of the neck, made him stagger. The fake Mizuchi wavered but didn't fall. He stopped for a moment, his breathing heavier. Then, a venomous whisper. Always too sharp. Lantern. The fish-masked Anbu didn't react to the codename. He simply raised his guard. But he wasn't fast enough. A swift motion. A seal, carefully etched into the fake Mizuchi's neck, lit up. Lantern sprang forward to stop him, too late. The seal flashed for an instant. Then it went dark. The fake Mizuchi collapsed without a sound. Dead. A suicide. He would never reveal anything. Lantern remained still for a few moments. The wind carried the dust stirred by battle. Then, he turned. His eyes fell on Ren. bleeding. Broken. But still alive. Lantern stepped closer, crouching beside him.